Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to today's events, the future of weather, water, climate services, where we do want to discuss the trends and the perspectives of how access to reach all and provide access for all. We have quite a few here in the room. This is great to see. There's a few spots still left and maybe some more people will join us. But a very warm welcome to you here in the room, but also our audience online. Very much welcome from wherever you're joining. Some technical information for you joining online, just to fully participate. The session in the room will be held in English, but there is French and Spanish interpretation available for you. Simply follow the guiding information from our chat hosts and any other instructions they have for you. Also, feel free for online participants to share any of your questions throughout the session in the chat. You can do that in French, in English, or Spanish. And then we have two opportunities where we can address your questions. So I thank you, dear online audience, you're all set up. And I think that gave you, everyone here in the room, to feel comfortable, make yourselves seated well wherever you are. And so we're ready to get started. Once again, a warm welcome from my side. My name is Ilona Paganoni from NERA's International Consulting, and I'm happy to be facilitating this event today as your moderator. The past 12 months, the hottest year ever measured. The floods and heat waves that are out of the ordinary. Just a few recent news from the past days. Having myself lived and worked for some time in the Philippines and over 5 years in Honduras, Central America, the impact of extreme weather events and that they have on vulnerable communities are not foreign to me. But again, in preparation for this day, I was quite struck with the deep interconnectedness of weather, water, climate services with topics, and not only the ones that are traditionally connected to weather, water, climate services like food security, but also migration and peace building efforts, and how we should not be shying away to also address, to muddle with the technical aspects and the complexity that come with the area of weather, water, climate services. So that really struck me in preparation, and I'm very happy to jointly embark on this learning path with you all today. In the audience, we have many NGO representatives, but also we have academia, we have representatives from the private sector, and also national and multilateral entities. So I think it's uncontested the importance of the topic that we're talking today. And at the same time, while over the past decades, the quality of data available has been improving, still a lot of communities and countries, especially from the global south, lack the access and the opportunities to really reap the benefits of weather, water, climate services. So this leaves us with big questions for today that we want to tackle. How can access for all be achieved? What do different stakeholders bring to the table, and what are some limitations? And we draw a special focus on the role of NGOs in supporting the value cycle of weather, water, climate services. Nicely, today's event is not an isolated activity. It is actually the culmination of a 2-year-long learning journey that was organized and facilitated by the Swiss NGO DRR platform. Most of you surely know that this platform is a network of 19 Swiss-based NGOs who have the main goal to enhance the quality of Swiss NGO services to disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation, to then, of course, ultimately enhance resilience of the communities they engage with. The Swiss NGO DRR platform has been active for over 10 years. So congratulations on this, as many milestones have been achieved. And these learning days are one of those milestones. In the past 2-3 days, there were different thematic sessions where multiple participants really pushed into the topic and strengthened their knowledge around weather, water, climate services and how to put them to work as NGOs. I now have the pleasure to introduce to you Bernita Dornbosch, Head of Water Food Climate Team at Helvetas and member of the steering committee of the Swiss NGO DRR platform. So please, Bernita, come and join me here in the front and share some welcoming words with us.
Thank you very much, Lona. Good afternoon to you all.
I think we need the microphone for our online audience and the interpreters.
Okay. So on behalf of the Swiss NGO DRR platform, I would like to give you all a warm welcome to this event entitled From Observations to Resilience, Unlocking NGO Potential for Weather, Water and Climate Services. And we are very, very happy that you are joining us here today in person. That is always very nice after a couple of days of online meetings. But of course, we are also very, very happy with all the online participants over the past 3 days. And this was made a part of the success of the learning days. Your contributions online and now in person make that these learning days are really effective in the sense that they help make us understand what role NGOs together with other partners can play in delivering weather and climate services to make stakeholders more resilient. Now, Ilona already mentioned the Swiss DRR platform, 19 member organizations. We are all involved with partners in the South in supporting communities to become more resilient to disaster risk and climate change. You have already mentioned our objectives. It's about enhancing our work, enhancing the quality of our work, building on the diversity of knowledge, and also providing guidance, and especially also contributing to risk-informed development. Now, if we come to why the topic of weather, water, and climate services, it's especially that we believe that it's the first step to risk-informed develop, to have access to weather and climate services. It's not the only step that we know, of course, but it's the first one. Yeah? And I must admit that a couple of years back, when the working group started to discuss this, we were still, we became aware that as NGOs, we have a lot to learn still. Practice was in the beginning, was starting, and we really needed this dialogue with partners to learn from each other. We are aware now that we are part of a collective of organizations between the public and the private sector that are part of this value cycle, from chain to cycle, of weather and climate services. And we also see potential to contribute in the future. And I think this week's sessions have shown how. Now, the purpose of these learning days is exchange and learning on the topic, and also discuss good practices and identifying opportunities. And I think this event in the afternoon will still contribute to that. So what have we seen? We've seen 10 thematic sections, and highlighting some of them. We started with fundamentals, but also went down to actual practice at project level. We saw climate projections, large scale, view far beyond the end of the century, but also looked into a short forecasts that are relevant for decision making by farmers. We understood the frameworks for climate services worldwide and the importance of private sector engagement right this morning. And all these results will be summarized and will be made public. And it's also to our experience that these results will be used far beyond the community of Swiss NGO practitioners and their partners. So I'm very much looking forward to this afternoon's event, and we will hear multiple perspectives and try to close with findings and also look into the future. But before that, I would like to direct a few words of thanks. First of all, I would like to warmly thank the leads of the Weather and Water Climate Services Group, Christina Ebischer from Helvetas and Johanna Zwalen from Zoy Environmental Network. You did a great job, and I think it will be an input for much learnings, hopefully written down in the future. Also, of course, a warm thank you to all the organizers of the different sessions. It was a lot of preparation work, but it was good that you put your questions or knowledge on the table as a starting point. Thank you, of course, also to all the speakers that have invested time, have contributed with your experience, offering us an overview really of the state of the art of weather and water climates is. Special note of thanks also for the translators who've sacrificed their nights of sleep to be able to accompany us and make sure that we actually understand and can have a dialogue across languages. And finally, also warm words of thanks to the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation for the support to the NGO platform, the contribution. This is what also makes these types of events and learning possible. I think it's an example of collaborative work. And yeah, I just hope that the guidance that we may all take away from these sessions will actually help to improve our work and that of our partners in practice. Thank you, Ilona.
Excellent, Benito. Thanks so much, because this really, it's great to know that today's conversation are part of a much broader and larger effort of learning and capacity building. So this is really happy to hear. Now, let me share a bit what is awaiting us today. Coming up next, we want to look back at the learning days where these 8 different thematic sessions were happening, and to hear a bit from the facilitators about key findings, insights, conclusions that they were able to draw. Then that is followed by a brief break to freshen up for then the panel discussion. We will wrap up then and look at upcoming highlights, and then finally conclude the event with continued conversations with some refreshments. So this is really just a short overview of kind of what is coming next. But let's dive right in. And first of all, I want you, the audience, to give you the opportunity to share about your takeaways and learnings or inspirational thoughts that you've obtained during the past learning days. So you can see there is a Menti code with a question about sharing your learnings and takeaways. You can access the Menti by just using your phone and a QR code. Same for our online audience. And throughout this whole next session until the break, the Menti will be open and we'll be collecting your input. We will come back to those results at the very end of this event. Also, I already want to let you know, hearing the different facilitators about a recap of their sessions, please start already thinking of what kind of interests you to dig deeper on, what would be interesting to ask a question. At the very end, after hearing all the conclusions from the different presenters, there will be the opportunity to ask questions. So now let's hear from the facilitators. Where was more complexity maybe added? Where did you reach some conclusions, and what things were just kind of stuck out to you? I would like to invite Omar, Maria, Arabella, and Sonia to come to the front and share with us a little bit. We will start like the learning days started, with the fundamentals. And there we have Omar to kick us off. He's a climatologist and expert consultant for international cooperation. So thank you, Omar, for sharing with us some of the fundamentals.
Thank you. So you see on the graphic, a framework that we introduced, with which we introduced the fundamentals of WWCS. And in the course of the next days, then it always has been picked up again. So this famous value cycle. And the idea behind is really that value gets added with these different elements, and it starts with the user requirements. So you need to know what you want to deliver, and that's where you should start. And then, of course, there's a chain of quite technical elements, and we went into more detail in several of the sessions, which is with data management, gathering information from stations, how you create forecasts, or how you deal with climate projections, and then how you deliver information from this. So how you tailor this information to the users you've identified in the beginning. And lastly, of course, the whole exercise is only useful if the information reaches the users, and also, and that's why we call it a cycle now, more than a chain. It's because you want to learn from it. So user feedback again is important. So we keep improving. So this is a framework that is useful to understand the thematic, but also to reorient yourself in the projects, the context you are, and identify what bottlenecks exist. And you see already two stakeholders are shown, but actually there are many more stakeholders involved. That's also something we introduced. It's a thematic which is multi-stakeholder by nature, and that's something which calls for partnership and something we have to embrace. And perhaps you can click. We had some also polls on this subject. First of all, we asked what kind of products the different participants were using in terms of forecasts. Quite interesting, there's quite a balanced response from climate projections to also seasonal forecasts, and most of them weather forecasts. So there's quite some expertise already, I found. And then if you look at the elements where the most relevant role of NGOs is perceived along the value cycle, you see exactly so at these elements of the delivery of the information or the needs assessment, it's where the strongest role is perceived. And it's actually also what we are talking about here today. So everything is only useful if we manage to do this right. And so that's a call for the NGOs.
Thank you very much, Omar. This really gives us the perfect foundation to move now to the case studies from different DRR platform members. So 5 projects from different parts of the world have been capitalized on, spurring some discussion and learning from NGOs and their work with and on weather, water, climate services. Thank you very much, Maria Claudelin from Caritas Switzerland, to share with us about that session.
Thank you. As Ilona said, 5 of the NGOs have been implementing weather climate services projects across 3 different continents. And during the past years, these projects have been evaluated in expert workshops where the challenges as well as some solutions to them have been addressed. And we wanted to have this session so that each project would have an opportunity to present itself to the audience. And in the session, we focused on the role of the NGOs in weather climate service provision, and we showcased the similarities of the projects as well as some differences in them. And as the projects are located in developing countries, 4 out of the 5 projects focus on providing agrometeorological services to rural farmers who otherwise wouldn't have much access to that information. That is important for them in making good farming decisions in the challenging climatic conditions. And the one remaining project was providing national early warning systems to reduce the risk of hydrometeorological hazards such as cyclones. And as a key takeaway, like Omar said, we really identified the role of NGOs as a strong linking function between the farmer end users, agricultural extension services, national meteorological organizations, as well as local governments. And it was pretty evident that there was no good weather data available to be utilized in the project. So the projects ended up creating weather data by themselves. And the data is being managed and interpreted by experts who put it in a format that is usable to the farmer end users. And these services can be near-term weather forecasts, early warnings, as well as guidance on crops and irrigation, and recommendations on agriculture calendars. And it has been evident in many cases that the farmers really appreciate this information. They make decisions and improvements based on it. And as a consequence, the yields have increased. And more about the challenges and solutions to them will be coming up in bits 4.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's great to hear about the practical side of the work of NGOs and the pivotal contribution they make. Now let's make a deep dive into 2 thematic areas. The first being about early warning system and anticipatory action, and how these make a real difference in saving lives and reducing losses. I very much welcome Arabella Filippona from HEX EPER to share with us.
Thank you, Ilona. Although we had a diverse panel in this session with speakers from WMO, the International NGO PIN, People in Need, local Madagascan NGO, as well as a representative from GNDR, the Global Network for Organizations Working on Climate Resilience and Disaster Resilience. The speakers were agreeing on most of the points, and my key takeaways were, despite the current strong push for early warning systems through the UN Early Action for All initiative, there is still a lot to be done. And the main key takeaway for me was early warning needs to be translated into early action. And what does it mean? What does it mean for NGOs? And it was highlighted that NGOs, as NGOs, we have a role in the whole value cycle, in the whole value chain for early warning systems and anticipatory action. We can support in providing improved risk information, local data on exposure, vulnerability, so that there's a better database, which then helps to develop forecast-based impact-based forecasts, and that also supports in really co-designing early warning messages that are people-centered, that really bring across the message to the population at risk that is understood. And I found there was a good example where it was said, well, we don't need the forecast that tells us, well, in 3 days you will have 100 millimeters of rain. The people need to know which areas are affected, will the flood be, how high will the flood be? So the message has to be clear and understandable for all. And we as NGOs, we really have a responsibility in contributing to the quality of the early warning that is sent out to the communities. Now, when it comes to early action, we had GNDR presenting their new guide on locally led anticipatory action. What I take away from there is that communities have to be considered as stakeholders and not only as beneficiaries. I think I have to close. So final words on early warning systems and anticipatory action. The key barrier, access to finance. And we really have to make sure how we get this pre-arranged funding secured for communities at risk. And I hope that's also something that we can take up later on in the panel.
Thank you very much, Arabella. Please note, we're really good on time, so take your time. It's very valuable what you're sharing with us, and I'm really happy to hear about all those insights that you're able to share with all of us. We continue with an equally important topic. Many NGOs are invested in, and we just heard from Maria, like out of 5 case studies, 4 are focusing on agro-meteorological information services and how to improve farmers' adaptation to climate change. So here with us to provide a recap is Sonja Chiren from SwissAid. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Ilona. I must say that a lot of the points on this session, agro-meteorological information services to improve farmers' adaptation to climate change, has already been shared because it's similar projects that have taken place with similar challenges, although a bit different than early warning, more in the seasonal forecasting aspects. We were actually in our session welcoming 3 different projects. One was in Guatemala, Altiplano Resiliente. This is a project that targets the resilience of communities there by IUCN. A second project that is a project with the help of Caritas and other partners in Tajikistan, also working with farmers on agro-meteorological services. And the third one was a more kind of blueprint approach almost already called PIXA that was developed by the University of Reading, which is helping implement projects on agro-meteorological services, one could say. Now, you can see them here. The Guatemala project is up in the middle. The Tajikistan project is down to the right. And here is the PIXA approach. I'm not sure I've already been too long, I hope not. Okay, I would like to bring the key messages in 4 topics. The first one is more for less. The second one is make sure you're not lost in translation. The third one is the farmer knows. And the last one is exit. So on more for less, I think the good news and takeaway was that there is equipment available every time for a bit less of a price. So when meteorological stations a few years ago cost $10,000, today automated stations can be available for a few $100s. So that is also a reason why NGOs can actually work with that kind of information or even help gather local data and help close the local data gap. And the good news in this is that with digitalization, you also have good means to actually share information. This is not always easy, as we all know, who are in this section of work, but it is promising for the coming few years. And because resources are freed up a bit on this first part, we should not get lost in translation, but rather invest resources better in the interpretation of this data. So a big role in all 3 projects for the respective organization is a very targeted and good interpretation of the data for farmers. And in Guatemala, they work with, obviously there's a lot of technical knowledge involved, so technical people, but mostly local teams and climate promoters, for instance, indigenous women, who then really learn how to read this data, how to interpret it, and how to derive recommendations, especially for their communities, and go and speak with the communities. So this is really a focus. In Tajikistan, farmers are even involved already in data gathering. So there is all this effort really of working with communities, and the interpretation is supported technically also via even Meteo Suisse and technical partners. So we see that it's good to have both. You need some technical support, but you also need to already think about who is going to use the data and work with communities the most possible. And in PICSA, facilitators are really capacitated in every place PICSA is introduced to work with farmers in workshops. And this is really also where resources are put ultimately. So to come to the topic, the farmer knows, all these projects were nice in that they, or probably also successful because they put the farmers at the center. Farmers are business people, so businessmen and businesswomen, and they are usually naturally taking their own decisions regarding their farming system. So what PICSA, for instance, does is elaborate just options. It's not so much recommendations as possible options for better adaptation. And the farmer then looks at the farming system he's working in and looks at what he would like to do. As mentioned, this turned out to really yield less losses and better yields ultimately in all 3 projects, up to a third actually better yields. So this is really, really good results. And the last point, exit. Because these projects are seasoned projects, one can say, we are able to learn a lot from them. Now, when you look at the picture, you can actually see that all of them have a pretty complete job, from going from data gathering up to speaking with farmers and discussing what could be a good option. But the projects have in common that they're successful because from the start, they actually investigated who the key players are in this location. So all of them work with Met Services, with the Ministry of Agriculture, extensionists, and the local teams I was telling you about. And it was interesting to hear that all of them also look at financial sustainability right from the start, pretty much from the question whether farmers should pay a small fee for what they get in terms of information, to making sure you can tap into international climate finance, or ultimately also working directly with governments so that they can ultimately take over and fulfill their role and responsibility in weather, water, and climate services. So you can actually make an exit at some stage. So it was really good, and thank you for listening to the key takeaways.
Thank you so much, Sonia. I think hearing just from these 4 sessions, this is a really rich bouquet of insights and conclusions that you were able to share with us. You're free to take your seats, and I would like to invite the 4 other presenters to come to the front, and I will introduce you. Now we want to broaden our view a little bit, and we're moving from weather to climate, reflecting on how climate scenarios need and can be tailored for a local adaptation strategy. A very warm welcome to you, Joachim Jung from Vivamos Mejor, and thanks for sharing with us.
Okay, thank you. I will try to share briefly about our main conclusions from this morning's session on climate scenarios. We had quite a journey from the very global down to the very local and back to the very, very global sphere. First, we learned a bit, we explored a bit about the different tools of developing climate scenarios from different organizations which exist, from the IPCC, the World Bank, and others. There's not one single tool which is the best, just it always depends on the purpose which you want to apply. However, all have in common that they come like from a global level, and they have like a resolution of around 50 to 50 kilometers, and which for designing really tailor-made adaptation measures, very often it is not enough. And to help this out, there is a so-called process of downscaling, where these scenarios are combined with geographical information collected on the ground, which makes it much more precise, but for sure much more data is needed. We then explored a bit two cases of where such a downscaling process has been led. One from Guatemala and Honduras, which we explored a bit more in detail, where all this information on the climatical, meteorological issue was combined with information collected by farmers about on 4 crops: maize, coffee, rambutan, and cacao, and therefore much more precise adaptation measures can be developed. And in addition, this is accompanied by a process of monitoring different phenological parameters of these 4 crops during a period of 10 years, so that constantly all the plant measures or measures to develop can be adapted. We then went from a very local scale up to developing national adaptation plans, and then explored about as developing adaptation plans is not an easy task, and so this requires national or local capacities. So we explored a bit about what are the structures in place to strengthen local capacities to develop such plans or adaptation measures. That's a bit about the content of the session. As key learnings for me, well, there were several conclusions. One I mentioned already: there's not one single tool of the existing tools to develop climate scenario which is the best. It always depends on the purpose. And yes, it makes the downscaling makes a difference. When you come to design really together with the farmers to design what is their choice for best adaptation measures, it makes a difference if you base only on rough climate scenario, or if you have a better information basis of downscaled climate scenarios. However, I could say for me, there is one major conclusion of this session, and I think it also coincides with conclusions of other sessions, that whether you talk about designing adaptation measures, concrete adaptation measures, or local weather forecasts, or whole adaptation plans for a whole country, this always has to be a co-designed process of developing these measures, combining knowledge and information which only the local people can bring, combining this information together with the information which science and climatology can help us out. And when we combine these two, then we get the best results. This is from my side, the conclusions of this session. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, very pertinent. This allows us also now to zoom out and to look at the global and national perspectives. Johanna Zwalen from the ZOE Environment Network will share with us about the importance of international cooperation frameworks, also about efforts at global level to strengthen national services and entry points for NGOs. Please, Johanna.
Thank you. So from global to national and local. Our session had a focus on how to strengthen public services and how NGOs can play a role to support this. And what we discussed in our session are possible entry points for contribution to strengthen public services, and we discussed that from different perspectives, from perspectives of different stakeholders. With a representative from the World Meteorological Organization, we first learned about the role of WMO and existing global frameworks and initiatives. Here, supporting the understanding of the user needs, as also just mentioned by Jo, and feedback, as well as institutional arrangements for co-production, were possible entry points for NGOs discussed. As a second input, we had a representative from Meteo Suisse. He was sharing his experiences related to cooperation between national hydromet services. Here, the importance of the dialogue between regions, the regional dialogue, as well as South cooperation were highlighted and discussed. Finally, we had representatives from the NGO Helvetas Bolivia. And with colleagues from Helvetas, we discussed their experiences in promoting the interaction between the Bolivian hydromet services, CENAMI, as well as municipalities, and how Helvetas promotes this interaction and agreements between authorities of those two levels. The importance of the dialogue and the trust between those who collect the data as well as those who use them were lessons learned discussed in this third part of the session. So in summary, the levels, global to national and local, are interconnected both horizontally as well as vertically. And it's not just about data which needs to flow from one level to the other. It's really also about effective dialogue and cooperation across those levels. And NGOs can contribute to that as well as participate in that.
Thank you much, Johanna, for reminding us of the importance of joint efforts among the different stakeholders. And already speaking about different institutional mandates, different stakeholders, it is now Christina Abischer from Helvetas, who takes us now into the realm of private sector engagement in weather, water, climate services, and how NGOs can collaborate and each player to leverage their perspective and core expertise to deliver and ideally also sustain weather, water, climate services in the global south. Please, Christina.
Thank you, Ilona. So to explore how we as NGO can engage best with the private sector, we had 4 key speakers, excellent key speakers, 2 from the NGO sector, 2 from the private sector. I will not summarize now because I would like you to go and see the recorded videos, which will be uploaded from next week onwards. It's really worth, I would say, it really gave us a lot of insights on what could be the possibilities and but also where are the challenges. My takeaway is that in the middle, there is somehow the question of partnership, partnership between NGOs and the private sector. There are different types of partnerships. The partners can have different roles. What is needed is a kind of a shared vision. What do we work for? And some common understanding and shared values. Otherwise, we know that probably all partnership might be difficult. It takes time to perform in a partnership, and it takes even more time to find the right match. So the right plug. Where do you plug in if we work cross-sectorally, cross-disciplinary together? But when well plugged in, there is power in the partnership. And that's also a recommendation for a publication that was mentioned. The power of partnership is something you could read. And some of the authors, contributors are here in the room, and I'm very happy to say that. But then the second question, who pays for that power, for that light that then lights on? This is quite a difficult question. We have seen different modalities, but we did not really yet dig deep into it. What is the business model? Where does the cost recovery come from? What does really work? On the NGO side, we are still testing a little bit out. Different NGOs are testing different approaches to that. And on the private sector, we have seen there is a lot that is offered for free to NGOs and other users. And with that, I come to the last takeaway I have from that session. On one hand, we have seen also in other sessions, we as NGOs, we need to build more capacities. We need also to train ourselves a little bit better. But we get also clearly the message from the private sector, don't wait, just get started. There is a lot out there. You can start now bringing these weather and climate services to your people, to your users. Do it and use what is there. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Christina. And that already gave us maybe a teaser for the panel discussion, because at least to my knowledge, we have 3 of the contributors of that publication you were mentioning, Power of Partnership, here in the room. And then you'll also have the possibility to ask more questions and maybe to dig deeper on those modalities of working together and finding the correct plug. So that's great. To wrap up this presentation of the sessions, I would also very much like to invite Ernst to share with us, Ernst Schaltbecker from InnovaBridge. Thank you, Ernst, for sharing about key findings on what applied research is telling us regarding necessary conditions for weather, water, climate services to unfold their potential. I think everybody is comfortable, so go ahead, Ernst, take your space.
I need to be close to the image.
You do.
Dear colleagues, we had 2 sessions listening to academia, having made research work on water, weather, and climate services, to follow up one of the presentations here on early warning and early action. This is confirmed with an initiative and a platform called AWARE of the International Centers for Agricultural Research, CGIAR, and they add early warning. If it's not followed by early action, doesn't help, but it should also be enriched by early finance. And I think there we have the confirmation from a research side that concerning early warning, early action, you are kind of the right track. Now, to this metaphoric presentation, we compared 2 research works done by 2 independent researchers. The first is Dr. Mani Nepal from the International Center of Integrated Mountain Development in Kathmandu. a study in Pakistan, and Dr. Emmanuel Atto from the International Water Management Institute in Colombo. Several year-long research in Ghana on co-production and inclusion of indigenous knowledge in forecasting future precipitation events. Now, first to Pakistan. The approach was really very scientific. The study chose 2 districts out of 2 major crop growing provinces in Pakistan, Punjab and Sindh, and compared in a sample of more than 600 households, users and non-users of weather information services of the Pakistan Department of Meteorology. And it turned out that when looking at the outcomes in terms of crop productivity, crop production costs, and income, there were no and never significant differences between users and non-users of these information services. A sobering insight. In Ghana, between 2017 and 2022, a team of researchers tried to find out what would indigenous knowledge be to forecast weather events in the range of 1 day up to 5 days. And they found quite a number. And they began to compare these 2 prediction methods by measuring accuracy. And sometimes both methods coincided in predicting the onset of rainfall or no, and then whether it was a light rainfall, a medium rainfall, or heavy rainfall. And when combining the 2 methods, it turned out that this combination was the winning game. It outperformed the scientific forecast and also outperformed only indigenous knowledge. So we tend to conclude that a model which is unidirectional, only using the data of an official meteorological services, they are not recognized as useful because about half of the inquired respondents were not using it at all. And the outcomes were not significant. And the reason why they did not lose it is a deep lack of trust in the usefulness of these data. A unidirectional model, here it is not only called co-design, it's called co-production, because they produce the forecast together, combining scientific insight and indigenous knowledge. And I mean, let's give the word to these 2 people. Despite being a user of these information services, he's not spending less on production costs. This woman there knew it was raining, so it did, so she deserves some rest. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. You can take your seats. Thanks to all the presenters for this rich walk through the past 2 learning days and for sharing with us. I'm happy to pass now on the word to the audience. I hope you, dear online audience, have been entering your questions on a rolling basis into the chat. And I give you here in the room a little bit of time to think if you want to raise your hand. We do have microphones in the room. Please use those as those are needed for the interpreters to hear you. So I want to check in with our chat hosts in the back. If there's anything for us, if there's any questions, we can direct to the presenters.
Thank you. For the moment, can you hear me well? Yeah. For the moment, there is one question from Vafodorova that is asking in reference to the case presented in Tajikistan, where farmers were using and collecting data directly. If the data collected locally on the ground, with simple equipment, can then be used to produce future climate projections, and what to do also to prevent the data loss. That's the question, I think, referring to the case in Tajikistan.
Well, I know it's not just the facilitators, it's different people who are knowledgeable about those aspects. So I want to pass on whoever wants to react. I can see there is a reaction from you, Omar. And it can be multiple responses. I'm sure our audience will appreciate the more insight, the better. Okay, yeah, I will respond to this question since I'm supporting the project. So the data is being used for different aspects. Some of the data is used to directly develop services from it directly. So timing of sowing, for instance, or timing of harvest. And some of the data is also used then to correct forecasts. In this case, it's weather forecast, so not climate projections. So the data has been collected only for a few years, so it's a bit difficult to enter into this climate topic that has been introduced. So mostly on the weather scale, so correcting forecasts and developing services. Thank you. Another reaction or also question? I heard there was that one question. Do we have something from the audience in the room? Yes, Flor will be supporting us with the microphone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Andrea Rossa, Meteo Swiss. I wonder what the experience is that people have had in these experiences lately, how to manage the uncertainty when passing on weather and especially climate forecasts or scenarios or options. How would they go about? How do users receive uncertainty information? Thank you very much.
Thanks much. I think that's a question that has come up quite a few times, right? I see the presenters looking at each other. Yo, you were nodding. Would you be able to say anything, or anybody else? How to deal with, yeah.
Well, I can say something, but not respond to the question how our partners really deal with it. What I know from our partners, that in terms of getting national weather forecasts, enriching them with more local information, and then produce more local forecasts in cooperation with private sectors maybe. This is one of their main fears, that what do we do if people then trust us and then the forecast is not correct? Because for sure you can always say, well, this is only probability and we have a probability of 90%, but this is quite an abstract, 90% is quite an abstract number. So this is really one of the main fears or concerns our partners have in going a bit further in this direction in terms of weather forecasts. I guess in terms of climate projections, the issue is not that burning as it is anyhow a projection on a longer term. It is, I think, by nature clearer to all people that there's a lot of uncertainty in it. This is just from my point of view what I can share according to this question.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to see David Rogers to complement that.
Yeah, if I may, it's a problem we're dealing with all the time, and there's two sides. Certainly, the environment is uncertain, therefore we have to figure out how to convey it. We're never going to have a forecast that's deterministic. It is probabilistic. And one of the big problems we have at the start is that the forecasters in many countries are not willing to give out a forecast with a low probability of a very high impact and potentially fatal destructive event at a low probability. They will wait until it reaches a threshold that is very high. And that's often it's fatal. I mean, the forecast is not given out. So there's the problem of trust right there, because they're not giving out the information at all. So there is actually, why was there no forecast when we had such an event? And then on the other side, I think it's to do with, we have to translate the information in a way that is in the terms of how people live their daily lives. There's uncertainty in the price of the crop you're trying to sell. There's uncertainty in a lot of things, and trying to turn it into two sorts of things. Trying to explain how that uncertainty. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Telling me to stop. But then on the other, so on that side of trying to convey in the language and in the culture of the people who understand uncertainty, and we use this. I use it very often. This expression. There's a 15% chance of, somebody said it, 100 millimeters of rainfall. So what? There's a 15% chance that your family will die tomorrow. That's you respond differently. So it's putting it in the context of what is the threat and what is the level of risk you're willing to accept. Then I think the forecasts become more relevant. And it's using, translating it in those terms. What is the impact on you? What is the risk you're willing to accept? I'm certainly not going to accept a 15% chance of fatality in the family. I may accept a 15% chance that the crop might be damaged, but not if it was a 15% chance of total loss. It's putting it in those terms.
Thank you very much. Anyone else also want to contribute? Yes, I see Christoph, and then go there.
Actually, I wanted to ask a follow-up question I think it was Sonia who told us about Pixar or mentioned Pixar. Do you have a comment on that? Because my understanding of Pixar is that it allows you to think in optionalities, which is actually quite good as a strategy against uncertainty. So can you maybe expand a bit on that?
Thank you for the question. I will expand drawing on Pixar. As a moderator, I only know so much, but and maybe also a thought, then add my own thought. In Pixar, from what we have seen, the probabilities even in terms of rainfall, for instance, for the coming season, is calculated in a very, very simple manner, so that even farmers calculate their probability with a view to their own crops that they are growing. And what Pixar then does is they have a lot of breeding and variety knowledge, and on this basis, they actually discuss with farmers how they can diversify their risks by introducing more adapted crops. So that is how I would say on the farmer level, and in terms of how you can work on this recommendations options level in agriculture and more on seasonal forecasts, how you can sort of deal with this uncertainty. And since, as we said, we have a similar project in Nicaragua, we also built it on agroecology and locally adapted seed varieties. That's how it all started, actually. We started referencing or describing all these local varieties that are better adapted to what was observed in terms of changes. And then with this, we realized that it would be adequate to actually start measuring the changes. And so only then did we start collecting daily weather data points. And so the farmers there too are involved in diversifying the risk, in spreading the risk by usually broadening what they are cropping, what they are growing. And that's a key strategy, I think.
Thank you. There was in the back there, Flor, maybe you can pass the microphone. We can leave this one.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Otto Simonet from Zoe. My big question always is about the money. And you had one visual that shows the 3 blocks, and you probably have discussed this. Who in the end will pay for all this? I think currently it's a lot of public money. And I assume on the long term, this will be some sort of a service with maybe very small amounts or so, but I have no very clear vision on this. I mean, can anyone help me a little bit with it?
Yes, I actually really appreciate that. We're already entering into kind of the core of what we also want to focus on during the panel discussion, but we will take it now because we have the time and I think we're all already engaged. So who wants to take this? Christina, go ahead.
It's not that I have an answer, but I can just say, as we have discussed it in that session, there are very different models, and it depends a lot on the country's design of the hydromet services. Is it a public service, and is it considered as that, and therefore also run and paid mainly by a government? There are also countries where it is mainly in private hands, and therefore it's a question of the business and who are the end users that pay for that. Then it's not the taxpayer, then it's an end user, whoever, the hydropower companies and the farmers and different sectors. And there are also different mixed forms. So if I'm not totally mistaken, it depends a lot on what the national regulations are, what is possible, what is allowed, in which direction it develops. And our role then as NGOs is to find out in a country where the system is not robust or reliable enough, how can we support, how can we come in, and how can we also support that it becomes sustainable. But I think there is not one answer in general to that. I would like to hand over to the private sector or to the...
I can make a little bit of a general comment because it really depends on the situation. But one thing that I personally think is a fallacy is to try to directly finance the cost of a system of weather stations by paying in a sustained model, by requiring that there's an upfront investment in trying to recoup the money directly. And the reason for that is, and now this example from Tajikistan that we heard is not quite right. This picture is changing as the weather stations become cheaper and cheaper. So let me answer that for a bunch of very expensive weather stations and a system that the WMO would use and help to include, to improve the global forecast and then also the national forecast. Let's, in that realm, we can see when we look at the markets and we measure the use of weather information by the size of the market that pays for it, that in those cases where there is a good foundation and freely available data, the market then becomes so large that it generates tax revenue, etc., that feeds back, of course, as socioeconomic value also to the financing of the initial investments that one has to make. If you try to say, I will only put in 50 weather stations if somebody pays it upfront, that typically is not sustainable. Now, I'm talking about an environment like in a developed country where this already, the value chains already work to a degree. If you have to get the value chain started, then you have to make this upfront investment. But the exit that was mentioned, the exit strategy is still to say, in the end, there will be enough value generated there where the data is used to warrant to pay for the upkeep and further improvement of this hardware infrastructure.
Thanks much. David?
If I may, just to pick up on that. So from a World Bank perspective, I mean, we make a lot of investments in hydromet services. Frankly, they don't always work simply because they are either too short in investment. The country is not in a position to pick them up. It doesn't understand the importance of actually the service to the country. Often it's done in response to a disaster. So there's an investment is made. So you're buying those automatic weather stations, whatever they might be. but you're not sustaining this with a kind of relationship. But I would then turn to Daniel and say, from a WMO point of view, it's a long-term investments needed in a country to bring up its capacity on that side. And on our side, it's about quality economic growth, meaning that we have to see this weather information as part of, and it will come up in the panel, I think, is that we have to see this weather information, not just compartmentalized for agriculture, extremely important, but that's one, you know, it's for many other applications. And only when a country embeds this into the whole of society and sees the use of the information, will you build that tax base, will you build up that economy, and then it will be paid for. But it's also totally linked to the ability of the country to develop. And we see it often so fragmented. We're doing this, but we're not actually saying, but how are we actually going to help this country's economy grow to a point where it's, you know, it's really reducing poverty, it's increasing job and prosperity, and therefore generating income. And there's a lot of things that have to happen to make that bit work. So while we kind of got a band-aid on the problem, we need to start really looking at root causes. So the discussion we're having is the root cause. We can do something about it.
Yes, please, Daniel.
Thank you, David. I'm Daniel from WMO. I mean, I would just add to that. I don't think I can think of an example in a non-high income country where the most vulnerable populations are, if they receive some kind of weather services, they aren't either subsidized from tax money or from private donations or from an NGO or from the UN and from whoever. I think David's right that unless the country is in a solid financial situation where providing services to the most vulnerable through taxpayer funding is a priority and possible. I think possible is one thing, but having it a priority, I mean, look in the US, we can argue it's not a priority. So there is sort of our little microcosm of where we engage versus the bigger picture of development, which is challenging us to be sustainable and to reach the most vulnerable.
Thank you very much. I think with this, oh no, we have another question. Please go ahead or comment.
Just to add on this, hello, my name is Marta Vogler. I'm working for the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center, bringing in this development perspective. I mean, what we can see also is then coming back to this global to local dimension and access to data. For example, ECMWF having really 9-kilometer forecast data, but it's only available for the member states. And then if a country in East Africa wants to have access to the data, they have to pay for it. And we could see just recently, for example, there was forecasts that were not available for Malawi, and then people died there because they could not have that warming at high resolution because they were only lower resolution data, and else they would have to pay for accessing this data. So I would maybe go back to WMO and ask what can you do to deal about it, and what would be also responsibility then of other regions that have the capacity and the knowledge is there, the data is there, but they just cannot download and access this to issue their warnings.
This is to the core of what we're talking about today. There will be the possibility to react. I think I want to close this first session. It's really just the first part of this event, and I think it gave us already so much kind of food for thought. And looking also at you, how you're sitting on your chairs, I have kind of the urge to make a circle and just start the conversation all together. But we have the opportunity to have these esteemed panelists in front and where we can really engage more in this conversation. And I will make a note to really come back to you. Thank you so much. To digest a little bit all of this information, also kind of come up with other questions, or where do we want to dig deeper? We have a break. We'll take a break of 15 minutes. It's really to stretch your legs, to use the washrooms, take a sip of water. It's also getting quite warm, or maybe that's just me, but it's quite warm. So we'll open the door a little bit. You have time to interact, but also please remember at the very end of the event, there will be the apéro where you have more opportunity to network. So I'll be back, please, in 15 minutes at 3 p.m. sharp, and we'll continue with our panelists that you've already heard. So thank you very much. So as far as for the room, there were already very lively conversations. And I hope you also, dear online audience, had time to take a break, stretch your legs, and maybe even check the weather forecast to decide what you do after this event. For everybody else here in the room, thanks for staying with us. We're very excited to move now to the panel conversation that we basically actually already started before, but which is great and gives us some great energy to continue. We want to tackle the questions, you know, like what are the trends for weather, water, climate services? How to grease the wheel of collaboration? And what potential is there and opportunities for NGOs to contribute to the value cycle, and where are limitations? We have an exciting lineup, and each of our panelists brings a unique perspective and experience from their personal, professional career, but also from the institutions and organizations that they're representing. So I would like to invite our panelists to come in front and take a seat. I will be introducing each of them, and then we can start with the questions. So please come in front, all the panelists, take your seat. There is no specific order. And you can also already help yourselves to water and get comfortable. So welcome, esteemed panelists. It's great to have you with us. Please help yourself to some water. We're excited to have you. First of all, I would like to introduce Daniel Kuhl, Director at the World Meteorological Organization, WMO. He's responsible for development partnerships, resource mobilization, and project management. He is a hydrologist by training and has throughout his career focused on disaster risk management. Before his current position with the WMO, he has been working for multiple years with the World Bank and the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery. He's all about turning technical know-how into practical solutions for communities in the Global South, and says, we can't do it alone. Neither can we as the WMO nor the World Bank. Coordination is key. Next, I would like to welcome David Rogers, Senior Hydrometeorological Advisor at the World Bank and consultant. With a career that spans oceanography, meteorology, climate, and environmental development, David has been at the forefront of turning knowledge into action for the past 18 years. He recently returned from Sri Lanka, where people are challenged by the severe monsoon season. And David emphasizes meteorological information is crucial, but saying, as we heard before, above average rainfall isn't going to cut it. People need precise data in the right format to take action. Also with us is Christoph Ramshorn, co-founder and since 2020, Chief Operation Officer of MeteoBlue. Christoph focuses on successful integration of weather data in new value streams that require more than simple customer-supplier relationship. I'll give you an example which is way above my knowledge, but I'm very happy for him to also dig deeper, because this not simple customer-supplier relationship really ranges from simple data delivery to incorporating customers' weather station data into the MeteoBlue learning multi-model. And in relation to today's topics, he emphasizes, don't just improve the forecast, make sure it reaches the farmer first. So it's not just about new data, it's also making existing data work for everyone. And please welcome with me, there we have him, Sergio Perez, SDC Program Officer from the Climate, DRR, and Environment section. As a trained civil engineer, Sergio has dedicated his career to working on disaster risk reduction, adaptation to climate change, and water management issues. He says access for all is always connected with financial sustainability of these services. And so he works towards improving inclusivity and increased sustainability. We also have Mark Klininger with us, Head of Service and Development at the Federal Office for Meteorology and Climatology, MeteoSwiss, and member of the Management Board. Mark's focus is on ensuring that fundamental weather services are accessible and reliable, forming the backbone upon which more specialized services can be developed. He says it's important to distinguish between basic services, which set the standard and a benchmark, and more specialized forecasts that private companies can build upon. And of course, welcome with me, our dear Benita Dornbosch, Head of Water, Food, Climate Team at Helvetas, a member of the steering committee of the Swiss NGO DRR platform. Benita is an agricultural engineer specializing in irrigation and with extensive expertise in Latin America. Her work in Peru, focusing on climate change adaptation, water, and agroforestry, has significantly shaped her perspective and knowledge about climate services. She points out NGOs can bridge the famous last mile, but they also must think in systems. So again, a big welcome to all of you, and we're excited to have you. Now, with regard to Access for All, I would like to ask you individually, where does your organization stand? What do we need to reach that access in the near future? And what is currently your organizational or institutional biggest challenge that you're facing? I would like to please invite Daniel to share first with us about your thoughts on this question. And I forgot the microphones. We have 2 microphones, and I'm happy if you keep passing them among you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, and thank you for having me here. I mean, as WMO is an intergovernmental organization, it's a United Nations specialized agency. So our role is to serve our members, who are the governments. So that immediately, to be quite honest, puts a constraint on us in terms of providing access to all, because we follow the lead of our members, of the governments. We promote open data and open services. We advocate for it. However, at the country level and at the regional level, it really depends on the national institutions and the regional institutions, whether it's their own decisions or their legislation or the systems which they're part of. And that is a challenge we face. We are a co-lead of the Early Warnings for All initiative, which was mentioned earlier, which does aim to ensure that all citizens of the world receive early warning information. I won't say by when, because it's an impossible ambition, but it's an ambition. And I think for us as WMO, the challenge there is that, again, we are working with the meteorological and hydrological services agencies of these countries. We're helping them increase their capacities, provide better forecasting services, provide better warning services. But then the part of the value chain where we can ensure access to all is a bit out of our reach. And it's often out of the reach of the national meteorological and hydrological services too. They don't have the capacity or often the mandate to work at the community level, for example. And that's where it's critical that the NGO community, as well as the official civil protection and national disaster management authorities, become part of the conversation and part of the effort. So for me, this is kind of an easy answer because we're just constrained by who we are. We wish we could ensure everyone had access, but it's a bit out of our mandate as much as we do promote it and advocate for it.
Thank you very much. I think that goes very much in line of also what we heard about, knowing the value cycle and the different stakeholders and what each stakeholder can contribute. So having heard this perspective from the WMO, anybody else would like to share from their perspective? Benita?
Nope.
Is there one or two?
Too many voices. Yep. Speaking of for the NGOs, let's say, of course, this week has shown clearly that in the countries that we work with, together with our partners, what we aim to is contribute to climate resilient development. And of course, we focus on the poorest, the most vulnerable populations and parts of the country. That's the reason for our work and the reason for our being. I think as NGOs, and this has also been said this week, we are first of all also, of course, we should be a user of climate services and climate information. And there are still some steps to make, and learning events like these contribute to that, to learn. Of course, and I think we've seen many examples that we are here to increase the access at the last mile, let's say. Oftentimes farming communities, local governments, and also agencies that provide technical assistance. Now, what is very important, being a temporary actor as an NGO should be, that we analyze the systemic perspective of climate services. Who should be doing what? Who is doing what in practice? And does this climate circle really function? And where are the weak spots in order to reach the most vulnerable, and that being our mission? And where can we contribute as an external actor to temporarily help make those linkages? I see that as the biggest and most important role. And of course, there are challenges. I mean, we ourselves as a user need to understand. If not, then I think it's very important that the meteorological data that are being gathered have this society value that was referred to. I think that's still a big challenge. And of course, the sustainability, financial sustainability is one thing, but the sustainability of climate service to reach over time to the groups that need them, I think that's still, and we have seen that also this week, a big challenge.
Thank you very much. I think there was,
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation. And this is really an exciting opportunity and a group of people. And I think this is at the heart of what we should be doing now. I can't speak for the World Bank, but I can at least speak for the community within it that I've been working with for some time. And in fact, we met yesterday. Daniel was actually part of the first part of our meeting. The second part, we talked about the future and what are we doing wrong. And there's a lot of things that we've done, which is essentially we've focused on investing in Met services, and we see slight improvements. That's really Daniel's job. Right? That's what they do. They look with their members. On our side, we are much more broadly investing in a country. So we have the breadth to actually look at the whole of society, where investments, we have agriculture, we have urban, we have one important area, digital transformation of countries. And an aspect here is that we need to work far more to bring, we heard the words mentioned so many times today and earlier in the week, co-production, co-design, co-produce. Everybody is involved in this. And up to now, what we've tended to do, we go in and we work with the government. And the government, Daniel mentioned mandate. I'm trying to figure out how we break mandates. How do we get rid of this? It's my responsibility to do all of this. And it's actually not. It's all of societies. And when you have a mandate, you start to exclude everybody rather than including them. So we're going to embark on an effort in the next few years, probably focused in just a few parts of the world at an experimental level, because I can't do this at scale yet. But we really need to change the way we work together. We can have this dialogue, but let's do this practically now. Let's actually work together. Anik mentioned working between the NGOs and let's say chambers of commerce. We're trying to do that also. So if we can bring all together and we can start to work to improve the products that are available to civil society, and we can build the systems that are needed, we will improve things. So we've got to shift away a little bit from the total focus on the hydromet. Let Daniel fix that one. And we move on to how do we work with you to actually utilize this information, but make sure that you're in the driving seat. Not, from our point of view, you should be driving the whole thing. You and other parts of civil society. Not coming from central government down, but coming the other way.
I think that's a very welcomed statement from the World Bank. Hearing that, I think we will be we will be drilling down into of how to bring together the different blocks and the collaboration. But I would very much like to hear from you, Christoph, because also before we had the question in the room. So how is this even being financed? Because as soon as we started talking about access for all, and seeing how the very vulnerable communities are not reached. Yeah, what can you share with us about that?
Yeah, maybe I first talk about the access for all and then a little bit about our business model, 2 sentences or so. So we both we run our own weather models and our own processing, and we also use the results of public weather services. Of course, we use the data from public weather services. So we do stand on the shoulders of the public sector. We improve it through our own modeling locally, and we package it so that our customers can directly consume it. And that is one of the value added that we actually provided, this type of packaging. We are available globally. You can go to any point on Earth and ask for a forecast, and we will produce the forecast out of a multi-model chain at that point in time that you ask for it. So if you're in Central Europe, it will include the latest radar data. If you are in Central Africa, it will not. It will use satellite data, which are not very good, for example, for rain, but better than nothing. We make it available through classic web technology, through apps. We make it available as data streams for commercial customers. And we have a lot of requirements, of a lot of needs for local partners. So for example, in some African countries with many, many different dialects and no access to smartphones, people rely somehow on spoken messages that need to be formulated by somebody who knows what they are doing. We can provide the data for them, but they will have to fulfill that. And that ranges also to economical platforms that just as part of all the services that they offer, they also need a good weather data. Thanks for inviting us here, because to reach a large group of people, you also have to have the capacity building in place. In developed countries, we learn it here and there, and it's just everywhere. In developing countries, a lot of people rely completely on traditional knowledge, or they even don't have the notion that you could forecast the weather. They think, well, yeah, God makes it, and that's it. So it was very interesting to hear about the example from Ghana and from Pakistan, juxtaposing those two. We observed that as well. If you have a reasonably good forecast and you use it regularly, you develop and combine it with indigenous knowledge, you develop a good local forecasting capability. To the business model, for one, I would really like to challenge people in the room to show me another website that has this breadth, depth, and quality that Meteor Blue has, available for free or for not very intrusive, although our users complain, but not very intrusive advertisement. We do that because partially in the developed countries, that is a good income stream, even with a little amount of advertising that we do. And being a very small company, we have to show and prove what we can do. So a lot of times when people come to us for a weather forecast, they say, oh, I have watched you guys 3 years, 5 years. We have extremely long lead times before people come sometimes, but we also have very, very little churn when they go away. So that type of relationship actually works then for us to be out there and make it available for many. Then of course, we also have subscription services, and we sell data to corporations as a business-to-business setup.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful, I think, also for our audience. You can start passing it.
Thank you. So I was listening to all of you, and before to your intervention about the societal benefits of the weather, water, and climate services, and from SDC, from the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, we think about weather, water, and climate services as a means to an end. So what is the use of it? And we see it mainly, of course, there's a lot of use, but we focus a lot on their use for adaptation to climate change and for disaster risk reduction, for early warning systems. So when, for example, Omar was showing the cycle, and then you come at the end when you say user decision, there's kind of where we start. Okay, that's the user decision. So what does it imply? What does it mean? You have, if it's for an early warning system, so how do you communicate the warning? How do you reach everyone? How do the people, authorities, communities, and everyone know what to do? What are the preparedness plans? What are the standard procedures? How to react? Are the shelters? What are the social mechanisms, social protection mechanisms to provide for food vouchers or food shelter for these people? So that's the start. And so how do we come? So after all these difficult and very scientific and technical processes, then we use it as a means for everything, for an end, and then starts the part where we see the real impact to the communities. Or if it's in terms of, or even if it's in terms more of humanitarian aid, anticipatory action. So how do you trigger the mechanisms, and how do you have the pre-financed mechanisms prepared so they know how to start delivering the aid and who to reach, and are people registered, and do you know who should get the aid? All these kind of things. And and then you were asking about the challenges, and perhaps to say a bit how we work. Well, we are a official agency for international cooperation for development aid and humanitarian aid. So we have a double mandate now. We are working in this nexus, humanitarian development, and the humanitarian one is universal, but the one in development is more focused on specific areas. There now we based on a concept which is response to the need of the people, but then also the added value that Switzerland can bring, and not only SDC, but the whole Swiss institutions, civil society, universities, private sector, and then also the long-term interest of Switzerland, which is in terms of stability of global prosperity. So, but saying that, we now have the challenge of budget cuttings, and always the challenge of how to do more with less resources, how to be more efficient, how to reach more people. And this is a huge challenge. We usually work on long-term relationships. We want, and with a view of sustainability, but and there is another challenge. How do with the programs that we support long-term, in a moment there must be an exit strategy, and how do we guarantee that things that are taken by the communities, by the local authorities, by the national authorities, and they have the resources to keep it going for the long term. And that's why I found your perspective so interesting, that if you see it as a public good, the weather, water, and climate services, and in the long term, they will pay for themselves, but really in the long term, and with a systemic view.
Thank you very much. Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Hello. So I'm from Swiss. So this is a federal governmental agency, and but we are not kind of a funding agency. So it's more a service agency. So I cannot really talk about funding, but I can talk about access for everybody. And I would say that within Switzerland, I think it works. We reach people. We have more installations on devices than inhabitants in Switzerland. So we really, so warnings get to the users. I mean, there's still room for improvement, and we work on that to make it more actionable and so forth. But I think it's there. And also concerning data, in about a year's time, our data will be available. It will be open. So we work on that direction as well. But however, and here I come to the discussion of mandate. So we have a mandate, and this is a bit, we cannot really change that mandate. So and one mandate is that we provide services for Switzerland, but not abroad. So this limits us a bit, but it's definitely not our goal to kind of provide services abroad. So maybe you can ask why MeteoSwiss is here actually. But then I come back to WMO, because there is a kind of an indirect way, because I think the WMO is providing an excellent framework to actually provide access to all through knowledge and through capacities. And here, I really hope that I mean, this circle that has been shown, we live that circle in Switzerland. So the circle works. And this is exactly an example how WMO works, because it's not something that has just came up by somebody in an office, but this is really a collaborative work and somehow a knowledge transfer from countries that made this experience, learned from that over many years, over decades, and try to conceptualize this in a way that other countries can profit from. We really hope that we can bring this out and share and reach other med services in a more peer-to-peer, I don't know, collaboration to strengthen these institutions. So maybe this mandate is a bit fixed, but maybe not completely. So there is a bit of a way back, a back solution, back door. Yeah. But as said, on the funding, nothing to say. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Thank you very much. I mean, it is also exactly the reason why we're here. It's not, you know, like there are, especially in the global south, those communities and countries that do not have this access and cannot, you know, like counting more stations than inhabitants. And so, you know, like the question about those mandates and maybe the institutional setup of the different organizations or institutions that you're representing, and maybe the hindrance that poses, that David gives us a little bit of a wake-up call and how that should change. The question though is, everybody wants to collaborate, everybody sees different stakeholders are needed. So what needs to change in order to grease the wheels of collaboration? And I'll leave it to you, whoever wants to respond. David, I can feel it.
Something to say. I've been thinking about this quite a bit, because it's no good just sort of saying this is important and not having an answer. So one experience, there is something in the UK called the Natural Hazards Partnership, and it's started off as basically all public bodies kind of getting together, making decisions together about sharing data, about the kind of systems that were needed to be put in place in order to tackle warning systems. Basically, it's based on hazards. It needed to expand to include private sector, NGOs, and other bodies. But the idea behind it seemed that we started thinking, can we adapt that? And adapt that. So, for example, it'd be very specific. Could we take something like that, bring the NGO community represented by this group here, and say, we'll sit together and we'll work through projects. Maybe it's your own projects that we can add something to. We have overlap everywhere. Tajikistan comes up, and in Tajikistan, there is a new investment coming from the bank. It's kind of in parallel with what you're doing already. It ought to adapt to what you're actually doing on the ground, and it should work with you. And if it's not working with you, there's something wrong with that project, right? And I'll try and fix it. At least I'll raise it with the people involved. But yeah, we both know what we're talking about with that particular program, and WMO may be involved in it also, but it should be with you and not around you. And I think we have to have that kind of place where we have the partnership, a real partnership, physical partnership, where people are exchanging information, what is actually going on. And when we identify a particular activity, we can say, here we can work together. And we do it on a very bilateral kind of way. We have interactions with the Red Cross Climate Center on a lot of things on anticipatory action, and we work with local members, but we're not doing it at scale. That we can change. And I think we can build something like that. We can say, right, this is what it will be. It will be public, NGOs, private sector, and will be for these particular purposes, and will be done in a very, very specifically for country applications. It can't be just a general international talk, although this kind of forum is very useful to get that started, but we could do that.
Thank you.
I can just add on that. Thank you, David. I think, speaking from my observation of the WMO members from developing countries, there is a mindset shift that has to happen in terms of opening up and working outside of their normal partnerships or their normal frameworks of engagement. I think a lot of them are quite territorial and defensive. Probably a lot of that has to do with always having limited resources. And I would venture that of our 193 members, probably 193 of them would say they don't have enough funding. It's not just the developing country ones, they're all struggling. So when you're in that situation, it's human nature to become very defensive and territorial about what you do. But we need a mind shift change where still the National Meteorological Service should be recognized as a single authoritative voice for early warnings, because you can't have early warnings coming from 5 different sources leading to confusion. And I mean, it's ultimately the government's responsibility to protect its citizens. That said, everything else needs to open up, and the Met services need to look at better partnerships and to hand off some of the responsibility which isn't theirs anyway. If we're talking about agrometeorological services to smallholder farmers, I doubt very many Met services are legislated to provide that. So let it go and support somebody who can do it and who can do it better than you, to be quite honest. Similarly, and the Tajikistan example is a great one. I don't know how many stations you've installed now, 300 or so or more, low-cost stations, or maybe 200. Okay, anyway, I'm very enthusiastic. There's this mentality from some of our members that if they're not WMO standard global stations that cost $50,000 or $100,000, then they're not good enough and they're useless. And that's simply not true. And you'll get Meteo Suisse. You integrate data from all sorts of different stations and partners. There's ways you filter it, and there's limits of how you can use it. But there needs to be a recognition that all of these low-cost stations, as well as other data sources, are also useful, and they should come into a national database that's accessible to everyone for their use. So it's a bit of a, to quote the movie Frozen, since I have children, you have to let it go and open up a bit and work sort of outside of your comfort zone. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in the same paradigm we've been stuck in for decades.
Thank you very much. Yes, feel free.
I would like to take this up because it's a very good point, and I just come from a workshop in the context of European Met Services, a collaboration of European Met Services on machine learning, because it's somehow a very similar situation, because the European Met Services face the challenge of this kind of new technology and also tech giants that get into the market and things like that. And so this threatening situation is really forcing these Met services to collaborate even more and to strengthen and open up. So there is a bit the danger with kind of limited resources and such dangers that you close you up and you do nothing. And I think it's really important to show also in development countries that this opening up is actually strengthening the institutions, and we really hope that we can somehow show that. And I mean, with we, I don't speak for Meteo Suisse, but for us as a community, because indeed, I mean, the collaboration, international collaboration among these countries is a really crucial thing. And I don't speak about only the collaboration between rich countries, European countries with developing countries, but really among these developing countries, because there's a rich resource pool there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, about this discussion about mandates, who does what. I think in practice, what you see is there's a gap. I mean, if the services do not reach the persons that need to make decisions and do something different and create that society value, then everybody can be in their mandate. So I'm the National Met Office. This is up to the quality of data and sending it out, the bulletin, and that's it. And the agriculture minister, you say, well, we don't know about that. We don't take it into account perhaps in our extension. So in practice, there is a gap. And I think if you look back at the experiences this week presented, many of the NGOs, and I come back to that sector, of course, are trying to support to build that gap in practice, because these services are only useful for the persons that are most vulnerable and that they're dependent on climate sensitive sectors. So in that sense, I think there is definitely at least a need, perhaps not always funded, but a need for national level NGOs, but also international NGOs to first of all, to make sure that the demand is there, and a demand with capacities to actually say, hey, this is what I need, because if not, tomorrow I can't have a proper decision on when to sow. On the other hand, it's also supporting the offer to make sure, hey, you're sending out this, but people need perhaps that. So I think that linkages between demand and offer is definitely something that NGOs and our partners in the countries that work on the ground, that understand the local context, can contribute to. That's not replacing, but it's establishing these linkages. I think another point is there, of course, and we've seen also examples this week, is about considering and incorporating local knowledge systems regarding climate. I think that's it's a challenging thing to do, but if we want people to take different decisions and be more risk prepared, it needs to appeal to what they say and do and observe. If not, it's perhaps not the trust assigned that it's needed for changing actions. And also, you know, in making sure that the cycle works, that there's a feedback loop. I think there's also a task there. On perhaps, let's say, a little bit of a more governance level, I think many NGOs have the trust and the connections to ensure that at subnational level, for example, this risk governance. So Met Office connecting at subnational level with agriculture, with water management, with the people involved in risk, with the health sector, so that everybody is aware of the knowledge, the services that are out there and can actually use them. I think that's also an important task. And perhaps as a third contribution is about making sure that let's say advocating for this last mile access, making sure that the funds are there, that the work is done, and that of course involves the national meteorological offices, but there needs to be a voice to make sure that these services actually get to where they are. And I think that's also a role.
Thank you very much, Benita. I think we really want to drill down a little bit more on this, you know, like where do others, institutional organizations present here have observed impactful roles that NGOs have adopted? Benita, you gave us quite a good, you know, like overview of the bouquet of different roles that NGOs really can make a contribution. I also heard in my conversation that I had with Daniel about, you know, like, okay, there's the NGOs taking on the last mile, but then how do we as WMO connect to this last mile too? So those kind of reflections. So if you could share a little bit, what in your experience has been impactful roles of NGOs in collaboration among the different stakeholders? And Christoph, I saw you wanting to contribute. I, of course, give you the word.
Question, but that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. David.
One very, very important thing was it's related to the Red Cross and Red Cross Climate Change Center, and in effect, kind of giving them credit for the invention of anticipatory action, because this has been a game changer for all of us. Because we used to say, this, you know, in our results framework for a project, so we would have the number of stations that have been installed, big deal. The number of people who received a warning, big deal. The number of people who receive a warning and can take action is quite different. And it's a challenge that's going on in real time at the moment, where people are saying, how do we measure that? How do we measure that? But what's the point? If you can't take anticipatory action, there's no point in giving the warning. So it's the NGO community, and in this case, Red Cross, who really put the flag up that said, you really need to think about this. It's not just early warning. It is really, you've got to be able to act. And it starts us to think about, how do you make sure that people are able to do that? Then it shifts us away from thinking about just providing forecasts, but now we have to provide decision support systems that mean things to people on the ground, that reach people who are at risk, and all of the people in between who are the NGOs who are supporting those people. So it's not like a little thing, it's an enormous change in thinking that's coming from this community that is shifting the way we have had to, what we want to work, and it's forced us to change.
Thank you. Just a brief comment, because we measure if people act on warnings. we do surveys and so on. But it's quite difficult to act then on that. It's another story, but it's also interesting. So I think it's possible, and there are ways to improve action, to make warnings, for example, more actionable. But it's a complex process, and it also for us, we don't do that alone. We collaborate with other med services on that.
Thank you. I would also like to hear from Sergio how you connect that, like mentioning means to an end and the end of people actually being able to react.
Yeah, and you mentioned the role of the NGOs.
Yeah.
But I was thinking on a specific example, which was mentioned during this week, and it is the work done by people in need in Cambodia. And with this EWS 1294, this early warning system for floods that started in some rivers in the north of Cambodia. And well, they started working at community level. It showed that it worked. So SDC supported them. It was then taken after some years by the national authorities, well, by the regional committees for disaster management, and the National Committee on Disaster Management in Cambodia, and the Ministry of Water. And then it received additional support to scale up this system, the AWS 1294, from the CRUISE project. CRUISE is an international financing mechanism it's called the Climate Risk and Early Warning Systems Initiative. And it's a mechanism to provide funding to support countries, small and developing states and least developed countries, to strengthen their early warning systems that focus more on software, on capacity building, on technology system, not necessarily in hardware, in equipment. And so, well, this now is working, of course, with also always the limitations of scarce resources from the side of the Cambodian government, but with this additional financing from CRUISE, and now under the umbrella of Early Warnings for All, which, let's say, now it's with the CRUISE project is sub-regional, so it covers Cambodia and Laos. So the system is also being taken in Laos. SDC is supporting also this in the whole Mekong region. And for example, it is part of this national road plan for early warnings that it's made under the Early Warnings for All initiative, which I think it's great. And it's part of this, who does what, who coordinates what. First, what does the country need? What does exist already? And who can do what, and what support can be provided in trying to coordinate all this. Also because an additional challenge is the efficiency of funding, and how to avoid duplication of fund, and how to avoid these investments are then later not sustainable. But I think I went a bit away from the last mile. But just to say that work by an NGO such as People in Need in the ground on a smaller scale can have a larger systemic impact. Well, of course, then supported by other actors.
Yes, please.
Actually, I was going to mention that example from Cambodia, but thinking of another example in Tajikistan again, I think what we've seen there, and I'm sure Caritas also does this, so this is not that I'm saying Caritas doesn't do it in Tajikistan, but I know the experience from Focus Humanitarian Aid, which is now called the Aga Khan Agency for Habitat, I think. Anyway, the humanitarian part of the Aga Khan Foundation is they're very good at being the interface between the authorities and the communities, particularly in Gorno-Badakhshan, where the authorities have a bit of a rocky relationship with the locals. They are providing that interface, and I think it's critical as an NGO to not shy away to being that interface. I mean, in some cases it's impossible because of the government, we understand that, but I think that also helps with sustainability, because you won't be there forever, even if you want to be there forever. You are going to have to exit at some point. So you have to help build those relationships, between the authorities and the communities. And in this case, in Tajikistan, it's the Committee of Emergency Situations, which is a civil protection and your civil defense entity So, you know, it's scary guys in uniforms who are protecting the border with Afghanistan, who are also supposed to support communities with early warnings. But without that interface that the OGCON provides, I don't think it would work.
Thank you very much for this example, very helpful. And I think that's also just to share something that I captured from one of the sessions, you know, like when they were talking about PICSA and how NGOs can also not only very focused contribute, you know, like with specific services, but also supporting the enabling environment. I think that caught my attention of maybe supporting, the example was given of women savings groups to then have the resources to then kind of make changes in their practices. So the different roles NGOs can adopt and the huge potential that there is. Mark had started us off a little bit with digging into the tech aspect, and I think I want to pick that up and hear a little bit from our panelists more about this. I mean, continued digitalization, AI are game changers. So what do these new technologies or like ever increasing technologies bring to the table of weather, water, climate services? Could they shake up or even replace traditional services like Météo Suisse or Mali Météo, for example? What is currently happening at your institutions and organizations? And also thinking, where do you see a future in that in relation to the digital gap? Like, even though more people have access, not everybody is included. Maybe Mark, you want to say more about it, or someone else just wants to talk to that? What is happening in your organizations on that, and how do you see that? Go ahead, please.
Maybe I start with the European perspective, but no, but it's well, shockwave maybe is a bit the wrong word, but it really kind of woke up med services in Europe. But the recent developments during the past, let's say, 2 years, where different groups, different companies, but also research groups showed that it's possible to make forecasts using machine learning models, and it's a quite a difficult situation because they are based on our models. So they use on the one hand side on the observations that were obtained during the past 150 years, but also these weather forecasting models are necessary to provide the information that these machine learning models can be trained on. So it's not a replacement, it's something that is on top of the other work. And by definition, this is not a problem, because I mean, it's a governmental agency, so it's paid by tax money, and so we provide somehow the basis for a market to develop. But there is a bit of the risk that the kind of the availability of weather forecasts, specialized forecasts, public forecasts will explode. And even now there is an abundance of weather forecasts. You have many different sources, but now, it can be expected that this will increase even more. And so, for example, the visibility of a med service will somehow is at risk. And this is for us, this is a real challenge, because then somehow this foundation that is needed to provide this information or to provide this model is us, but we don't receive this attention anymore. Now, as said, the med services in Europe try to kind of organize themselves and kind of jump the bandwagon and go in this direction. When thinking about countries that have less resources, the situation is much more difficult. And I mean, I think on the one hand side, they have far less data, and the observations, the local observations, become more and more important, because you train these models on these, and if there is no observations, the forecasts won't be good. And this is today less of a problem, because the today's models, they have the physical laws. So basically the physics is everywhere the same. So it doesn't hurt you if you have no done observations, but with the machine learning model, you need an observations where you want to forecast that. That's one thing. And then the other thing is the capabilities, the human brains. I mean, we have in Switzerland the problem to hire people doing that in Switzerland. And we have good salaries. I mean, we can discuss the parliament over there, but I mean, compared to other countries, it's okay. And but I mean, it's impossible to establish such a knowledge in poorer countries, and there I really see the danger that somehow this will be superimposed, that some, I don't know, companies will have I don't know, maybe it's in Google Maps or wherever, you will have some information, and then quite fast there will be the question, well, why have a bad service? We have it in Google Maps, and Google Maps will serve some usage, but some probably not, and then things become a bit nasty.
Thank you. I would love to hear from Meteo Blue how you're dealing with this, and
Yeah.
how do you see your perspective?
Good. Okay. I'll tell my conclusion first. It's a very exciting time. There will be significant developments specifically when it comes to doing forecasts that are tied to something else. What impact? What does this forecast mean for these operations or for those operations? There already a lot is happening, and a lot more will be happening. The second is, and I think that's what Mark mostly commented on, is what about actually the actual weather forecast? How much better will that get? And there, I'm still saying it's exciting, but there is even more than excitement, there's hype. If you look at the skill of the forecast models, and if you apply the techniques that we do that we use to verify models, they are not yet impressive. In fact, Meteo Blue makes its money partially by running these multi-model chains and by learning. It's a different way of learning, but also some kind of machine learning. Which model or which mix of models works best for a given location and a given weather variable and a given weather situation. We partially heuristically, partially through automatic learning, we figure that out, and we provide a consensus forecast of all those models. And that's a forecast that we validate and verify. And we know we are pretty good there. We're in the top tier. We are better than any of the published models, but as soon as they get really good, we can use them as source. So for us and our business model and our way of dealing with forecasts, it's an enhancement. It just gets better. And if you are technically interested, just go to the Meteo Blue website, look at the weather maps, and you will find IFS, which is the ECMWF forecast model. And you will also find the AIFS, the artificial intelligence ECMWF forecast model, which so far is beating GraphCast and Pangu, which are two models. GraphCast is the Google model. Pangu is the one from Huawei that have gotten a lot of press, which are both, if you validate them, if you check how good is the scale, they are both not on the level of IAFS. But we are also preparing to get GraphCast in. But please, if you are interested, those people who are interested, look at how these forecasts compare and what it means in terms of actually usability on the ground. I'm saying that because it's just a very complex technical field. And the excitement that we have is, of course, partially just not adequately represented to a general audience who will not get these finer points, right? That's why I'm toning it out so much and saying it's hype. I'm not saying it's only hype, but it's a lot of hype. So that's where we stand right now, and we observe it obviously very, very carefully in order to be ahead or at the front of this development. Having said that, we are doing forms of machine learning and, for example, learning from individual stations to improve the forecast since 5-6 years. We have a lot of experience with that. It's slightly different. It's not the same thing. But yeah, we are versed in that. Yeah, I think that's the comments that I would like to make at this point.
Thank you. I know David is also very versed in that topic.
Well, I want to take a slightly
Yeah.
different tack. It's about AI, but it comes around from the following. So I mentioned at the beginning about we have this whole pillar of activity under called digital transformation of economies. And in that, one of the important things is having the tools like decision support systems built into that. And one of the things that we're working on at the moment is looking at behavior. One of the problems, of course, is you may have a perfect AI generated forecast and warning, and it goes out, but it's not used because we maybe don't exactly know why people aren't using it. So we're now working on projects to build essentially AI-based actors who populate the decision support space. So you can find an AI-based population to see how they would respond to the warning information based on everything we know about communities. And that's quite exciting because it should hopefully help everybody really figure out, we have a perception of vulnerability. We get the information on vulnerability very often, of course, from the NGO community working on the ground. But then if you can turn that into something that enables you to test that and generalize it and have a much better idea of the general vulnerability based upon using machine learning tools, it's sort of it's working, it's happening within research community that working with us on decision support. But that's an avenue that's, I think, very exciting in terms of
very interesting, and should probably catch all our attention from the NGO sector to see how maybe our perceptions are being then represented in those models. I see Benita and Daniel willing to comment. Go ahead, Daniel, and then we have Benita.
Well, she was first.
Sure.
So to quote a hopefully not famous Republican senator in the US, why do we need the National Weather Service when we have weather.com? I think there has been, and he said this at least 10 years ago, even further, this is before there was AI, big tech and all of that. Already then there was questions of why we need these public services when the private sector can do it all, just to set the stage of it. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about the actual advances in technology, but rather that we at WMO, we are talking to most of the big tech actors. I mean, we have partnerships with Google, with Amazon Web Services, with Meta, with Microsoft. But that conversation always starts with an understanding, and I keep going on about this, that they respect the national single authoritative voice, that no matter what they do, it recognizes that at the national level in Switzerland, if there's an early warning for weather-related issues, it comes from Météo Suisse and nowhere else. If they can't agree to that, then we're out, and we cut off the conversation right there. What I find interesting is most, if not all, of the global big tech companies, they have no issue with that, because they recognize that to get into these markets outside of the rich countries, they need the government to allow them that access. And if they start to challenge the government roles, then there's an issue and they're going to lose access to that market. So far, that hasn't been much of an issue. Where we're also seeing some interesting developments with technology is reaching the last mile. And of course, here we're talking about digital transformation and one step further, digital inclusivity. Not everyone has a mobile phone yet. I imagine eventually they will, but in most communities, there's at least one person with some kind of a mobile phone. It might not be a smartphone, but what we're also seeing is opportunities, and this is working with ITU, International Telecommunication Union, that you now have regular mobile phones that can be contacted by low Earth orbiting satellites. So really urgent messages can be provided directly to phones, even where there's no mobile signal, and pushed as a push notification. So that's quite an exciting technology, and there's a lot of companies that actually are rolling that out together with ESA, European Space Agency. So I think the technology revolution isn't just on the meteorological side, it's also on the communication side. I think just as a last point, I wanted to highlight using AI also for climate services to ensure that people are getting proper information about climate. We all know there's a lot of misinformation about climate out there. We've been working with the University of Zurich, who have this climate chat or chat climate, I forgot what it's called, which is basically an AI tool that accesses official documentation from the IPCC and from WMO and from other sort of authoritative voices on climate, and you ask it a question about climate trends and projections, and it gives you the answer based on those authoritative sources. You can cut out the noise. Of course, not everyone uses this, but it's a tool that we'd like to see rolled out in a more operational sense and not just for researchers.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's exactly also what I would like to say. I mean, one thing is digital technology, AI on the generation part of the story, but the other thing is also, of course, on the end part and how the user interface works in practice, and that's through communication. With the end goal, of course, changing practices is, if you can, on that, based on that information. So I think there, what we can see, I think also this week, many examples that access, of course, to cell phones in rural areas is, of course, increasing very much, and that also changes the possibilities for communication. But not everybody has cover, and not everybody has a smartphone, and not everybody has a cell phone, and not everybody speaks the major language of the country in which this information arrives. So there's, I think, a lot of creativity being applied, let's say, by NGOs, by local NGOs, also by the local dependencies of the natural metro officers. I mean, people are using WhatsApp groups, Facebook, but also communal radio, city radios to every morning, you know, send out the forecast for the next week. So I think there's a lot of creativity going on with these means that we have, and they are increasing to communicate at least the forecast on the short place. But what I always recall is in the highlands of Puno, a farmer leader said, yeah, well, it's all great. Now Tsunami sends out these SMS messages in Aymara, in Quechua, about what's going to happen over this next, in a week. But then what? He said, we need more than that. Yeah, we need, what should we, or what could we do differently based on the information? So I think it's also about combining climate services with the agriculture extension, or perhaps, you know, measures that you can take in terms of water management or risk management in that sense. So it's not only about climate part of it, but it's how it can be applied. And I think there, but that's my personal view, and I think digital is not everything. I mean, there are great tools now. They're being tried out also by many NGOs that combine climate services with apps that provide, let's say, agriculture extension type of advice. I think it's worthwhile. We need to know what's going on. We need to explore. But I think when you ask people to do something different where their livelihoods depends on in terms of climate risk, we're talking about harvests, we're talking about what to eat the next season, then I often think that it's not enough to receive an SMS message. You need to see somebody who is more or less in a similar situation, doing things differently and reacting and acting upon that information. So the person to person, the extension agent, the farmer to farmer example or extension, I think that remains a very important part of making climate service actually be effective. And also in that part, of course, the countries where we work on still have huge challenges. So it's not only the climate information, it's about what to do.
Thank you very much, Benita. Very crucial.
Yeah, I would just, I fully agree, and I just would, maybe my picture before was a bit grim, but I fully agree that the potential is very big, in particular on this end and on this last mile. And I mean, there was a Nature Communication study, was a study published a few months ago, and they really kind of trained the chatbot to give climate services interpretation answers, so that you could ask this chatbot, well, should I, as a farmer, should I invest in wheat in Morocco? And the chatbot gives you back recommendations. Yes, but then you have to irrigate, so maybe it's better to use that kind of wheat and things like that. So the whole answer is there. You don't need any experts anymore. It was, I mean, it's.
Will you trust that if you?
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, it's I mean, the trustworthiness, I mean, there are many issues like trustworthiness. I mean, there might also a company behind it and they want to sell something, or, I mean, there are many issues. But I mean, what I want to say is it's really, I mean, it's understandable, it's actionable information. It's not just a number. It really say, well, the summer will be drier, or I don't know, you will have some pests and so forth. And so I really think that the potential is huge, but it needs some kind of, I'm a bit afraid to kind of leave that to the free market. Let's put it that way. I think it would be good if there is some kind of a bit of a, like, yeah, to increase this trustworthiness, for example, to make sure it's not just a marketing tool and things like that.
I mean, just to add on to that a little bit, we work with farming platforms who try to improve the yield and use the weather forecast for that and so on. But they now start collecting very systematically the quality of the protein in the different wheats. They do not only do yield management, they also do quality management. And they want to be able to anticipate where they have to source additional wheat if, for example, the wheat in that particular country is not sufficient or not of sufficient quality. And it's again that same pattern that you take the weather information as good as you can get it and combine it with whatever its impact is and try to measure that and get a good, because for the machine learning to work, you have to have very good data. Quality control data, enough data, and so on to make it work. And all of these things, they are happening. And I think apart from maybe at this point, it's not mature enough and might be even a marketing tool, but it won't take too long before people start being able to distinguish between good information and just garbage information that is being put out there because it benefits somebody. It's a learning process here as well.
Thank you for this optimistic judgment of those activities or those developments. Time is a bit advancing. We had before a really great energy of questions and also interactions from the audience, and I want to soon open it for you as well. I did miss in the beginning of the panel to point you to the second Menti that is open, just like also, and it's really steered towards the question, what are there other topics, hearing all of this, having heard about the thematic sessions, what are other topics that you also think that the DRR platform could and should be digging deeper on, and what would you like to see in the future, even ideas of how to continue the learning path. So whoever is still willing and interested to contribute, please do that. Before I open it to the audience and also you, our online participants, I want to make kind of a last round to collect a few responses of how and where do you see your organizations in about 5 or 10 years, and who will you be collaborating with and how? Give us some, give us some nuggets of what you think will be coming, and we've already heard some visions of breaking down the mandates and then going beyond. So that I think that would be really helpful for us to see, always also under the vision of how do we reach access for all.
I'll start.
Please.
Faster. Yeah. So 5 to 10 years is way too long. No clue. 1 to 2 years. One of the very important things is the capacity building and the building of natural intelligence in this particular case. And I thought it was very interesting in the contributions that we saw in the summary, how, for example, with Pixar was one example. Another was how do we use weather information effectively, and how do we spread this out? I think the notion of training the trainers and providing enabling technologies, or just use the enabling technologies to train the trainers and Meteor Blue will be very happy to be a part of that in a suitable way. Then enable the NMHSs, the National Weather Services, to make their contribution in a way that actually reaches the end users and can be consumed by them. And last but not least, enabling local companies, app developers, whoever who have this connection to the community, have the connection to the economic reality in a country and so on, enable them to just add weather data to whatever as a service they provide. So I see the major development in this expanding. We have seen that in the last 20 years in the developed countries, that weather has gone in many, many, many more parts, that more and more people become much more savvy about the weather. Compared to 20 years ago, you had meteorologists who knew that. Now there's quite a large variety of experts in other areas who also understand the weather. So, and the last thing to mention in the connection with the increased communication and availability of sensor data, I think the accuracy and the availability of weather-related data and usable for day-to-day operations, that will vastly increase.
Yeah, so it's kind of not so different from Christoph's. I think we'll be talking about weather intelligence, but we won't be talking about it in 10 years. We'll be talking about it now. So, so we're going to think about not weather and water and climate services. We'll be talking about, I mean, I use the word weather to mean all of those three, but we call it intelligence, meaning it's in a form that is useful. It's embedded in the, exactly what Christoph has just said, it's embedded in the decisions of different organizations, different entities, but it's sort of like become just a natural part of what we use and do, and it's available. I wonder a couple of things that we need to achieve. So the vision is, of course, we actually are able to have national meteorological and hydrological services that function and are funded. So 10 years, no, 20 years maybe. But we also have to change this, and it was discussed really in the session, the last one this morning. You know, we have a discussion about the roles of the public sector, private sector, but we don't have this sort of sense of animosity about it. It just works. Christoph is a very good representative of the private sector working in a public and private space. There's no big problem with it. It used to be. I mean, a decade ago, we were all we had sharp elbows, we knocked each other off their chairs, right? And that's changed. And I think what it is that you look at every society needs all the help it can get. It needs everybody. And that's what we all have to wake up to. We're all struggling to try and, you know, we do this. Yes. We've got to figure out that one piece. And I say, all right, we'll solve this within a decade. We all know how to work together to recognize our contributions, our you know, how effective we can be, our sort of role and responsibility in this society, and we'll be more effective at working with each other. And the tools that we have that are emerging now will enable us to do that. So that's my hope, and we're on.
Thank you much for this vision. We'll go to Sergio and then go to you.
So you ask how do I see my organization in 5 years? And well, in some way, it's pretty easy because there's the new international cooperation strategy that covers 25, 28. So it's written there, and it's been written by some colleagues and discussed at the parliament. And
5 years, which is beyond the brink of the next one, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But so personally, I think, well, there should be, SDC should be in a position to, from one side, let's say, looking at the broader picture, whether the extreme events are going to get more frequent and more intense. due to anthropogenic climate change. So one thing that I would expect is that we are able to really contribute to the expected climate finance and the national development contributions to play our part in reducing the causes of climate change. Then that we will be able to act at the different levels, let's say at the global level, in cooperation to help other countries and also play a part in achieving the SDGs, in achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement and of the Sendai framework, and where it includes early warning systems. So then also that we are able to be very efficient with the different initiatives that are there right now to increase access to early warning systems. And the challenge is this coordination, and how do we really make the best use of the money, and we make sure that there are no duplication, and they make sure that the investments are sustainable. And so there is a lot to do with governance. This is something we haven't touched, we haven't talked about a lot today, because at the end, for example, the warning systems is about governance. Who does what is the role of each actor, and at which level, at the local level, at the national level, at the international cooperation, regional and global cooperation. Where does the funding come from? What are the different options? Let's say from, as we said, from taxpayers, from an economy in prosperity, but also through international mechanisms, through, for example, the big climate funds, the Green Climate Fund, the upcoming loss and the Fund for Loss and Damage, which, whereas, you know, one of the main mechanisms to address, to avert loss and damage is early warning systems. So in this sense, I expect that Switzerland can really play a role in shaping policy and supporting the countries of the South, and to be able to manage all these risks and to protect the population.
Thank you, Sergio. Mark, you wanted to take that?
Okay. I don't know, some of you might have a Microsoft computer with Windows, and in Switzerland, then weather warnings pop up sometime. And these weather warnings are from MeteoSwiss. And so you can ask yourself, why is it possible that MeteoSwiss warnings will go into Windows? And I think you mentioned it before. The success behind that was actually, unfortunately, I have to say, not the fact that we provide these warnings for free, but the fact that all European countries collaborated and provide these warnings on one single platform. Because Microsoft does not bother to call MeteoSwiss or Austrian Met Service or whatever. They want to have warnings in one place, and then they use it. And indeed, they are very happy to use this authoritative voice. And we are also very happy about that, because our reach is actionable. If there is action, I don't know, but at least they reach some people. Now, what I expect is that this collaboration, this must be strengthened far beyond Europe. So we really have to strengthen that on a global scale, because, I mean, I don't know, Burkina Faso's warning will probably, Microsoft won't call Burkina Faso, basically. And so we need really kind of common platforms. We really have to bring these things together to reach people and so forth. So this brings me a bit to the collaboration with other Met services. I've said that in the beginning. So for us, it's clear we are happy to share our experience on climate change scenarios, on warnings and so forth. So I think there is really value we can provide to other Met services with less experience. Concerning NGOs, I think when looking back also a bit to the projects we were involved in the past, I think we can do better in kind of really find the strength of all the individual organizations and work together. So it's really about who is best in doing what, and then try to make proposals to SDC or whatever in a manner that all the organizations can bring in their best expertise. I mean, for MeteoSwiss, we are not experts in talking to farmers in Burkina Faso. Sorry, no way.
How does that sit with you, Bernita?
Yeah, obviously, I think that was one of the 3 points I would also like to mention. But I first think there's also in-house work to do when we speak about the NGO sector. And I think this week, learning events are very important. We have to stay up to speed, stay informed, and do things better. So, yeah, we have to make sure that every time we support national partners, when we develop projects, but we, as a second nature, as you say it, we take into account how is climate changing from the past, what's happening in the future. It should be structurally there with as without thinking, let's say, in that sense. And that requires skills, and that requires learning, and that was happening this week. I also hope that we also take as a second nature the fact that we need to be aware of how these climate services are actually arriving in the agriculture, water management, risk sectors currently. So we need to understand the system. We need to know the role of the national meteorological office, how capable they are when they reach, when they do not, how we can support. So I think there's a responsibility of getting to know all these stakeholders in this value cycle to be able to identify exactly now here we can play a useful role. And the third element is also, we've seen it, I think, quite a bit this week. Perhaps we haven't always mentioned it, but it's about the sustainability of these services. And finance is part of it, but it's also about how do we move on from well-functioning local projects to something that is really reaching all farmers across the country. And I think there we still have challenges across the board. Sometimes models have been developed and they seem to work, but the project ends and then it's back to business as usual. So I think that's also an enormous challenge of all the stakeholders involved. But how do we move on so that the national Met services structurally work based on user demands and needs across the different sectors? And yeah, there's still work to do.
Thanks for that. And also, like spurring our thoughts on that, I would really like now to open the floor to also to you, the audience. I know there's a response, but let me also just, like prepare for everyone who's now like taking it all in and kind of try to think, okay, now is the time for your questions is coming up. We'll hear one response from Daniel, and then the floor is yours also for online participants to share your questions.
So just quickly on where I see WMO in 5 or 10 years. Unfortunately, in terms of our bureaucracy, we'll still be the same because we are an intergovernmental institution that has to be consensus driven based on government negotiations. And that is a painful process, but it's kind of a requirement to reach global agreements on data exchange and so on. But as a secretariat, I see that we're going to have bigger impacts in countries, not necessarily because we as a secretariat will be bigger ourselves or we'll have more projects, but because we will work with more partners, starting with the national Met services themselves, so working with Météo Suisse and with others, but also with the World Bank, with the climate funds, with other UN agencies, to really recognize that our technical expertise on its own is useful, but doesn't finish the story. We need the big investors, the World Banks of the world and the climate funds of the world, to take up our technical expertise to really help countries and to then engage the NGO communities and others to make sure we reach the last mile. So I see we're going to have more impact, but we're going to, I won't say we're going to do less, but the scale of what we'll do will not be commensurate to the impact that we're going to have because we're going to work with more partners. In terms of our members, I think there will be more and more Met services with open data policies. It's a trend already, and I think we're going to continue in that direction. I'm also hoping that some of our global colleagues like the CMWF will also have more open data policies, and that's of course up to the members to decide that. And I think the Met services themselves will more and more welcome innovative partnerships and working a bit outside of their traditional comfort zone.
Thanks much for rounding this off about where you'll be standing. Now I think your hands are probably ready to go up. If not, you can also, I want to invite everybody to stand up, stretch your legs for, like half a minute and then think of a question that you can interact with our panelists or also among each other. So take a few seconds, get up, stretch. I am afraid there won't be coming in more air, so I cannot promise that.
Don't use too much.
But this is really the opportunity to interact with our panelists and kind of get rid of some of the questions that were burning before we switched. So yes, please. So we have our first question. Flora is supporting us with the microphone. Please, Nicole. Yes.
Thanks. I would, at the beginning of the panel, we have heard twice our mandate is, as for WMO, is we are an intergovernmental organization and we serve governments, and for Meteo Swiss, it is Switzerland, our mandate. So I am asking myself, who has the mandate to change mandates? Because we know that, yeah, there are service gaps. There are service gaps when it comes to line ministries within countries that do not communicate. Venita brought an example between the Ministry of Agriculture and the Met Service. Or there is obviously as well a service gap when it comes to, yes, when it's the interface between governments and NGOs. So, I mean, we know it is not your mandate, but we know as well that gaps need to be closed. That is one question. And maybe to refer back to what she said, okay, and if there's a non-member but needs urgent information, it is not in the mandate, but we know we need to provide information because we need, the ultimate aim is to save lives. We need maybe to change mandate. So who is it, the World Bank? Who it is? Is it the UN General Secretary? And who makes the kind of the pressure and the advocacy that those mandates are open, or if the Swiss Meteo could provide services, has more knowledge, but yes, it is not the mandate. So, yeah.
Since I brought up the word mandate at the beginning, it's an extremely important point, and it will vary from country to country, and whether it's international organizations, it's a little different. But the problem that we deal with in some developing countries is that there is a rigidity to the government structures, which is actually causing all the problems. So the mandate is a way of really sort of codifying it. So it's actually the whole government's function isn't working. And that's why a lot of the things we may do great, you know, we could improve forecasts and all the rest of it, but it will still not work. It will still be NGOs propping up a community forever, because there is no way that that country is going to move forward and evolve in a way that's necessary. And we can't change government. Well, we sort of try, but we do have ways of helping them restructure, shall we say. So I think that is something we really are trying to look at, because we have to, when we go to a country with a project or a program, particularly a program and a long-term one, we have a lot of long-term 15-year kind of efforts, increasing number of these programs, and we need to sort of look at work with government to look at what is not working in that government, and mandates are part of that. It's when someone puts out their hand and we do this and nobody else can, is, you know, you're going to lose, and we should either withdraw our funding and not enter into, or we should get them to begin to change. And it starts it starts necessarily at the very top, the president, prime minister, or cabinet. And that's serious. The only way we will make these things work.
Just quickly on WMO, I mean, there is the World Meteorological Congress, which is composed of the 193 member states. They are our governance. They provide our mandate, or they tell us what our mandate is. One of the challenges there, and please don't quote me on this, is that the countries are represented by the directors of the meteorological services. So they are there protecting their institutions, many of them, not representing their countries, except for Switzerland, of course. But they're telling us what to do, but their mindset is very much focused, a lot of them, on sort of the traditional Met world, where in theory they're supposed to be representing their entire country, all socioeconomic aspects of their country, their citizens and so on, but it's just not happening yet. Hopefully that'll change.
Thank you. Questions from our online audience? Yes, Mark?
I think thanks to the rich exchange, many have been answered through the discussion in the panel, but one remains, and it's directed to David. Who could be the convener of such national platform for true collaboration?
I think, how about if I say, the Global Framework for Disaster Reduction and Recovery at the World Bank will consider leading that to begin with. I'm going to go back and say that that's what we should do. And I'm going to bring that up in a meeting in Japan next week at Understanding Risk. So I actually think we should put our money where our mouth is. I mean, maybe it's my own money, I'm not sure. But I really think we have to start somewhere, right? We have a presence in the country, in many countries, most countries, developing countries, in a very broad mandate. But we don't really get into the area, the areas of the NGO area or most private sector. What we need to start to convene that, bring that together. Let's us start that. Let's put our flag in the ground and say we will convene something, probably on a regional basis. I can promise we could do that in South Asia. I'm not sure about other regions, but we could do that, and we could start to figure out then much more specifics about what can be done. I mean, we've got to do practical things, right? And that would be one step.
Thank you. Please add to it, Brenda.
Yeah, I think we can also be a little bit optimistic, at least from my time in Peru. I've seen the National Met Office, SENAMI, taking, I think, quite big steps to make the connections with the different sectors that depend on climate services. So that's agriculture, it's energy, it's risk with local governments, and it's the water sector. And under the WMO, there's the global framework to develop these national frameworks for climate services. Perhaps it's not working everywhere, but with support of the Swiss Development Corporation, those meetings at national level for the first time happen, say, hey, what are your needs? Energy sector, health sector, what are your needs? But this is what we have. So we're like market stalls, what SENAMI already produces in terms of climate products. And they were put on the table. In the end, yeah, big things start small, but it's also about a technician at the national ministry saying, hey, this already exists. I didn't know, but it's there. And I can just call up this person or look at this website and actually start using it. So I think there are at least already efforts at national level to make those linkages, and perhaps that needs to, of course, happen much more. But those, I think, are forums that make organizations look beyond this mandate. This is it, and this is where I have my money, and this is what I need to do under the law. But hey, I know this person in that institution generates that type of information, and that's useful for my work. I think it's also at that level that there are perhaps already some good examples on the way.
Thanks much. We'll take 2 more questions together and then have a finalist round. Yes, can we have a microphone? Or, I mean, let me just hand it to you.
Thanks. So I actually want to make a comment on this discussion, because I think when we're discussing the partnerships, it's about trust, no? So that we trust the different actors. And I think what we have been doing these days is now gearing up, while the institutions are showing they're gearing up to the capacities to build a trustful partner. And I think that's really important for the NGOs to show this, that will show trust to enter with other partnerships. And I think also SDCs is a great vehicle of building trust. That's the example you show, no? With small funding of some of the projects that have been shown also. SDC as being a trustful partner gives credibility to these actors on the working on the last mile, and then enables partnership with the World Bank and others. And this is actually what happened in Cambodia. And I think also through this dialogue, the WMO actually helps a lot on building trust also at the national level. So saying, okay, we think it's useful, important to work with the NGOs and convince also the national agencies that some good will come from it.
Thanks much. This is the final opportunity. Who has a burning question you still want to ask the panelists in front? Yes, please do so.
When I listen to this, it looks like one of the most important things happening in the world today. Now a question to all of you. Do you have one of these big philanthropists lined up to fund these kind of things? Because it's slightly geeky, it has a lot of technology, artificial intelligence, it has a lot of humanitarian elements. So if I were Elon Musk, I would throw the money at this? Is this happening now or not? And why isn't it?
But maybe get 2 spotlights on this, and then we'll be closing the panel. Have you received an offer?
Not broadly, but in specific sectors, there's huge interest now, particularly health and climate, which will make David happy because he used to work in that space. And actually at the World Health Assembly last week, it was agreed by the member states that climate is one of the priorities of WHO now. But we see huge interest from Gates, Rockefeller, Wellcome Trust, and a few others in the climate and health space. And it's even trickling down to little WMO. So we're seeing something. Bezos Earth Fund, there's some questionable things there too. Like, I don't know if they would pass the due diligence, to be quite honest. But that's a different subject.
David?
I suppose. So we have the bank has got multiple tranches. Most of it is loaning money to countries or concessional financing to countries. But the focus is kind of becoming more and more about how to do all of this, right? So I think we'll see on that side, there will be more emphasis on investments, which are actually trying to bring all the pieces together for all the things we've been talking about. Then on the other side, there is this facility that the bank has, which is a grant funding, can actually start. I mean, it's not massive amount of money, but it's quite a lot, and it can be put into this area very easily to actually really push this forward. And then we can also collaborate with our friends in STC and others. Yeah?
Sorry, a question. Are you talking about the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery? Okay. Yeah. May I come back a bit to, I was thinking about your question, Nicole, and I was thinking, well, I frame it everything on the disaster risk reduction because I see early warnings as part of disaster risk reduction and weather and water climate services as an input to it. But Sendai has Sendai has a part on governance. And among these, one specific target is for countries to have national DRR strategies. And a recommendation always is to have kind of a platform, typically a national platform for disaster reduction, risk reduction, where there is the different institutions that have a responsibility, either for disaster management or for hydromet services or for agriculture or for transport, energy, health, that they should coordinate. And this should be led at the highest level possible, usually cabinet or prime minister or delegated by the prime minister or president. And then I was thinking that this could be one of the things that you're suggesting that should exist, and they exist more or less in several levels and different levels. And then there should be exchanges about how to do this and how I'm learning about each other. And those are the regional platforms for DRR and the global platform for DRR. That allow me to make a bit of advertising. It will take place, then the next one will take place in 1 year time in June 2025 in Geneva. And this should be the place to discuss about this, to learn about each other. So I invite you to think about it and to take part of it. And for me, this is, there's the structure already. If it's working or not, this is another question, but there's already an agreement that foresees this kind of collaboration and this kind of, and recommends what kind of structures there should be to get to this.
Thank you. With this outlook, we move to the upcoming highlights of the platform and move towards the wrap up. Thank you very much to all the panelists. Thank you for being engaged in that conversation. Take back your seats, and I invite Christina and Jana to the front. Jana? Yeah.
Merci, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much. We've managed without dropping anything so far.
Sitting or standing?
Yeah, that's up to you. I've been standing the whole time and I don't mind continuing that.
Okay, great.
So we have Jana Junghart, who is a long-standing member of the core group of the Swiss NGO DRR platform, and Christina Abischer, who is the co-lead of this Weather, Water, Climate Services learning journey for the past years, but also including these learning days and this event today. So welcome. I do have a couple of questions to you to wrap up and to look at upcoming highlights. We have asked the audience at the beginning about their takeaways, and we would like to see now the results of what has come in. And I would like to ask you, Christina, is there anything you would like to highlight also from your own perspective on NGOs? What is kind of the key takeaway that you take from this learning journey overall on weather, water, climate services?
Well, first of all, if I look back where we started 2 years ago, we were like 5 representatives of Swiss NGOs, and we were a small group, a little bit lost also somehow, and at the very beginning of a learning journey, but I think we made really a steep learning curve. And somebody wrote, there is a vivid community. And I think that is really nice and also reflects how we ended now up here with so many people from different organizations, from different sectors. And there is interest and there is commitment, and it's really something moving in that sector is also our impression, and that we are part of that flow. And that's really great. It remains challenging. It is, we have heard about the multi-stakeholder environment we are in, but there is also multi-hazard. We have discussed about multi-channel. We have also seen that there is a need for multi-knowledge, scientific, traditional, etc. So it's multi, and that is really the challenge. And I think this must keep us going and running and learning. And maybe in that sense also, have a closer look at what our capacities are, where we as NGOs, I bring it now back to the NGO sector, where we have to build capacities to be fit for purpose, to play also our role. And yeah, about more evaluate what we are doing, what is the relevance of how we build in weather and climate services within our DRR and climate adaptation programs, look for cooperation with academia, applied research, etc. And maybe just related to the technologies and what has been like the last part of discussion with artificial intelligence, I really fear that there is a huge digital gap, and it is not closing. Because when I hear what are the new possibilities of these technologies, and myself involved in a project in northern Mozambique, where basically from the National Service, they receive a fax to the regional office where it's written, tomorrow you will have 1027 hectopascal. And nobody has a clue what it is, and far away from, people do not have smartphones neither. Of course, I go there with our weather apps, but people don't have in many communities. So we have to take care of that gap, even if we have also to take advantage of the new technologies. So that is a bit my takeaway, which means in the end, let's continue somehow, and let's continue also in that broad community.
Thank you very much, Christina, bringing that back to our attention. Moving to Jana, how do these learnings also connect with the broader program and activities of the DRR platform?
Well, interestingly, our current program that still runs at least until the end of next year has the title of Building Bridges. And the idea was initially when we wrote that program back in 2018, 2019, to build bridges between the head office and the country offices, to build bridges between the different communities of practices that we bring together in that DRR platform, and to build bridges between multiple stakeholders. And I would say that these learning days, and now culminating in this annual event, have been a pretty good example of making the learnings accessible, also relevant for the programs that we work in. We had many participants from all over the world, and you went great lengths to make it possible for as many people to join across the globe. So I would say, first, congratulate you as organizers that you created an event, and throughout that whole learning journey really tried to get people on board, and not only our partners and our members, but really thought about what do we need to advance this topic? So in a nutshell, it aligns very well with our with the idea that we had initially when we built or designed this current phase of the platform. What I also see is really the need for strategic and complementary alliances, something where I think that we as the DRR platform could make more efforts even to expand our strategic alliances beyond the ones that we have already established, and to especially move towards to exchange with state agencies, but also more and more with the private sector. And what I also retained that's relevant for us as the DRR, as a DRR platform, as an NGO platform, is that climate resilience, it's not automatic, and it does come with a cost or at a cost. It requires investment and resources, and the resources do not necessarily only need to come from DRR or climate change, which, by the way, is not a sector, but it needs to cover all the sectors. So it really needs to become an endeavor, a whole of society endeavor. So I really much like the point that you made. How can we create that narrative or shape that narrative that weather, water, and climate services are not just a climate product, but really relevant across all sectors. And I think much of it has been said. I don't want to repeat it, but it was truly inspiring. What we also, of course, see, and Sergio has mentioned it, are budget cuts everywhere. So while I see a tremendous need for resources, we also see less and less resources available. And we also see that, sometimes in our platform, we also struggle with available capacities, technical capacities, but also just time. So we continue also on the advocacy side to advocate for more funding, especially also more targeted climate funding that is not deducted from the regular development budget. And despite the current or the future cooperation strategy, where this is unfortunately taking place, we will continue these efforts to also shape the role of NGOs. Good. Collaboration is key. So we have been able to count on SDC in the past decade for support, and, like, I would say, really a trusted relationship. We would like to thank you for that. And I see this also as a start for more to come when it comes to collaboration as a partnership. And I'm very much looking forward to continue this good journey with you, despite the challenges that we may face. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all this motivation and looking out forwards of the DRR platform. Christina, we also asked the audience about, what is there to dig deeper on? What are ideas? Where should the DRR platform maybe focus more on? What do you see from your perspective, from the NGOs, and also what are the results from the audience?
There are many different results that came in. I don't know if we can still share. Just to say that we will take them into account carefully. I would like to focus right now only on two. One open question that came is, should NGOs develop in-house skills, and which, and to what extent do we need to develop them on our own? What do we need to know? Which capacities do we need to have to play our role? And where do we get them from? So that is definitely something that is a question for the platform, I would say. And in the same line, we need guidance. Somebody has written, we need a decision support system to guide NGO practitioners or non-technological experts. And as platform, there is an experience in that, if I think on the guidance for mainstreaming, for example. And I think that is something where we can definitely dig in deeper. But yeah, we will also have a close look at all the other open questions and issues, and we will continue on that. But for me, it was also clear that there is really a question, what do we need to know technically, scientifically, to what extent do we need to understand what the climate services forecast to do our part in the whole value chain?
Excellent. And a final question connected to this to you, Jana. So what comes next, both on weather, water, climate services, but also the DRR platform?
Well, I think the panel was certainly better placed to answer what comes next related to weather, water, climate service globally. But regarding weather, water, climate services, what a word, weather, water, climate services within the Swiss NGO DRR platform, there are two things that are coming. First of all, a publication that condenses, on the one hand, the insights from the 5 case studies that were the centerpiece of that learning journey, and combines it with the learnings from the past days. So you can stay tuned, and we will make sure to widely share that publication. And second, I would also like to reiterate, it's not the end of that learning journey. And we need to explore the needs, concrete needs, and also requirements towards NGOs, really taking up on the question or on the point that you just mentioned. So also take ourselves accountable. How can we play that relevant role and meaningful role? Apart from weather, water, climate services, there are, of course, many more opportunities to engage with the Swiss NGO DRR platform. If you would like to do that in person, and are interested in the more technical aspects of risk assessment and risk and hazard mapping, there is a chance in July, look always at our website, for a field day on risk and hazard mapping in the Emmental. My Swiss German is still not so good. And so you can join, it's free of charge. We did it last year, it's a super interesting opportunity to apply the knowledge. Second, we are planning to soon publish an online course on a really basic course for newcomers to the field of DRR and climate change. And last but not least are what else is on the menu, nature-based solutions and the publication of a valuation guidance. So how to attribute a certain value to nature-based solutions for DRR and climate change adaptation through a tool that is easily usable. And this brings me also to the next year topic of the annual event 2025, which will be around that whole topic of nature-based solutions. So you see, we are working, we are committed, and definitely weather, water, climate services will stay on our list and very high on the agenda, not just because of the past days, but also thanks to that.
Thank you so much for this rich menu that you shared with us. We look forward to it. And for me, it only remains to say thank you very much for your participation, for having us, for all the contributions today. As for me, these learning days definitely fulfilled their promise of breaking down the complexity of the topic, of looking at the role of NGOs, to huge potential in the collaboration, but also, you know, the call for getting our hands dirty and getting into it and to connect with each other. Thank you so much. That's it from my end. The co-leads of the event today, Christina and Johanna, it's now, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. From our side, just briefly, we really want to close this and go to the apéro, because I truly believe in the informal exchange as much as in the formal part. But first of all, thanks a lot, Ilona. I think this afternoon was great also because you organized this, you managed it, and you did a great job. Thanks a lot to you.
Thank you.
Then, of course, to our dear panelists, it was great to have you here. You traveled from far to be with us here to share your experience. Thanks a lot. It was really well appreciated to have you here and to take advantage of your inputs. Then all these events are not possible at the global level if we don't have translators. And I really have to say a warm thank you to Ivan and Augusto. They did a great job during the 3 days. They were translating without interruption. They sit in other countries. I don't know if we can, Ivan, let's everybody turn ahead and applause to Ivan and Augusto. Thanks a lot, wonderful. You can already book the dates for next year. We will come back to you for the next events. And then, of course, thank you to all my colleagues that have participated in preparing a thematic session in the preparation of the working group. It was really a great job that we did all together. We are not yet finished, and as we have seen, we have many things on the list still, but it was really a pleasure. Thanks a lot. And thanks to all the others that have been here, that have contributed to the sessions, to the plenary. And a special thank also to Omar, who has been a very valuable backstopper to us. Omar Belprat and Tamara Koma, who is unfortunately today not with us. Is she online? Also, big applause to Omar and Tamara. Johanna, I did not forget anybody, otherwise please tell me. If not, I would like to close. Thanks a lot to all and hope to see you out there in the apéro. Would be a pleasure. Thank you.